Tonight, we begin our journey in a place that most witches and wizards know exists, yet very few truly understand. Hidden far beneath the crowded streets of magical London, beyond the offices, courtrooms, and endless corridors of the Ministry of Magic, there is a department surrounded by an unusual kind of silence. Not the silence of secrecy, not the silence of bureaucracy, but the silence that forms around questions no one has managed to answer. The wizarding world often presents itself as a place of certainty, a place where problems can be solved with the right spell, a place where injuries can be healed, memories can be altered, and distances can be crossed in an instant. Magic creates the comforting illusion that everything has an explanation. Yet beneath that illusion lies something much older, something far stranger, because for all the power that witches and wizards possess, there remain mysteries that have resisted explanation for centuries. Questions that even the greatest magical minds have approached with caution. Questions that seem to grow darker the closer one gets to understanding them. Those questions eventually found a home, and that home became known as the Department of Mysteries. To the average wizard, it is little more than a rumor hidden within the ministry. People know it exists. They know unspeakables work there. They know important research is conducted behind its doors. But that is usually where the conversation ends. The details remain buried beneath layers of secrecy so extensive that even high-ranking ministry officials often know almost nothing about what occurs inside. And perhaps that is intentional. Because the Department of Mysteries does not study magical creatures. It does not investigate criminal activity. It does not regulate spell usage. Instead, it concerns itself with subjects far more dangerous. Time, death, consciousness, thought, love, prophecy, the very foundations upon which reality itself appears to rest. Imagine dedicating your life to understanding concepts that most people spend their entire existence avoiding. Imagine spending years studying death without ever finding certainty. Imagine researching time while knowing that even a small mistake could unravel history itself. This is the reality faced by the witches and wizards known as unspeakables. Their title is often treated as a curiosity, a clever name, a ministry tradition. But the name reveals something important. Their work is literally unspeakable. Not because they are forbidden from discussing it, but because much of what they discover may be impossible to explain. There are some experiences that language simply cannot contain. How would you describe standing before a magical phenomenon that challenges everything you believe about reality? How would you explain witnessing evidence that life and death may not be as separate as they appear? How would you communicate a discovery that could fundamentally change the way the entire wizarding world understands existence? Perhaps you would remain silent. Many unspeakables do. The department itself reflects this strange purpose. According to scattered descriptions, its halls do not resemble ordinary ministry offices. The architecture feels different, unsettling, almost alive. Circular chambers connect to shifting corridors. Doors appear identical, making navigation difficult even for experienced visitors. The deeper one travels, the more the familiar rules of space begin to feel unreliable. Some rooms contain experiments that have continued uninterrupted for decades. Others contain objects so poorly understood that researchers can only observe them from a distance. And then there are the rooms that few people speak about at all. The rooms dedicated to mysteries that have never moved closer to resolution, despite centuries of study. Think about that for a moment. The wizarding world has existed for thousands of years. Generations of scholars, generations of magical innovators, generations of researchers whose understanding of magic surpassed anything most people could imagine. And yet certain questions remain exactly where they started, unanswered, unchanged, untouched by progress. That fact alone should be unsettling, because we tend to assume that enough intelligence can solve any problem. The Department of Mysteries exists as evidence that this may not be true. Some mysteries do not become smaller under examination. They become larger. The closer researchers move toward the center, the more impossible the mystery appears. This psychological burden is rarely discussed. What happens when someone dedicates decades of their life to a question that may never have an answer? What happens when every breakthrough reveals 3 new unknowns? What happens when the object you are studying begins to challenge your understanding of reality itself? Not everyone survives that journey unchanged. Records suggest that many unspeakables become consumed by their work. Their obsessions deepen. Their connection to ordinary life weakens. Friends disappear. Families drift away. The outside world slowly loses importance. The mystery becomes everything. And in some cases, the mystery wins. The ministry rarely comments on such matters. It prefers silence. Silence is safer. Silence prevents panic. Silence preserves the illusion that someone, somewhere, understands what is happening. But perhaps nobody does. Perhaps the Department of Mysteries is not a vault of answers. Perhaps it is a monument to unanswered questions, a place built around humanity's inability to fully understand the universe. Because every great civilization eventually encounters a boundary, a line beyond which certainty begins to dissolve. For the wizarding world, that boundary may exist beneath the ministry itself. Hidden behind locked doors, guarded by researchers who spend their lives staring into the unknown. And among all the mysteries housed within those chambers, one stands above the rest. One mystery that has fascinated researchers for centuries. One object that refuses explanation. One doorway that may lead somewhere no living wizard has ever successfully described. A doorway hidden within a chamber dedicated entirely to death. A doorway surrounded by whispers. A doorway through which people can pass, but never return. And that is where our journey will continue next. Because deep within the Department of Mysteries stands an ancient archway draped in a black veil, a structure older than many of the institutions that study it. A structure that appears to separate the living from something beyond, whether that something is death itself, another dimension, or a truth humanity was never meant to understand remains unknown. But the voices coming from beyond that veil suggest that whatever exists on the other side has not fallen silent. And neither has the mystery. The Department of Mysteries contains many secrets. Some are strange. Some are dangerous. And some seem to exist beyond the limits of human understanding. But among all the chambers hidden beneath the Ministry of Magic, there is one room that has inspired more speculation, more fear, and more unanswered questions than any other: the Death Chamber. Even its name feels unusual. Most magical locations are named according to their function. The Department of Magical Transportation deals with travel. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures oversees magical beings. The Death Chamber is different. Its name does not describe what happens there. It describes the mystery itself. Death, a phenomenon that every witch and wizard experiences eventually. A certainty that remains stubbornly unexplained despite centuries of magical advancement. And at the center of that chamber stands an object that appears to mock every attempt at understanding it. An ancient stone archway, weathered, silent, motionless, and yet somehow alive with a presence that those who encounter it never forget. The structure appears deceptively simple. No glowing runes, no visible enchantments, no dramatic displays of magical energy, just an old archway supporting a tattered black veil that hangs between its pillars. At first glance, it seems almost insignificant, but appearances have a habit of being misleading in the wizarding world. Especially when dealing with ancient magic, witnesses who have entered the chamber often describe an immediate sense of discomfort. Not fear exactly, something stranger. A feeling that they are standing near a place where reality becomes thinner. As though an invisible boundary exists just beyond ordinary perception. The sensation is difficult to explain. Many compare it to standing at the edge of a cliff in complete darkness. You cannot see what lies below, yet every instinct tells you that something vast exists beyond the edge. The archway produces a similar reaction. People feel drawn toward it, curious about it, unable to fully ignore it, and that curiosity becomes even more unsettling when the whispers begin. Not everyone hears them. That detail may be the most disturbing aspect of all, because the voices are selective. 2 people can stand beside one another in the chamber. One hears nothing. The other hears faint murmurs drifting from beyond the veil. Voices without faces. Words without clarity. sounds that seem to emerge from somewhere beyond ordinary space. The Ministry has studied this phenomenon for centuries, yet no definitive explanation has ever been produced. Researchers have documented patterns. They have proposed theories. They have conducted experiments. But certainty remains elusive. One observation appears consistently throughout historical accounts. Those who hear the whispers usually share one thing in common. They have witnessed death, not merely understood it, not merely feared it, witnessed it. They have watched life leave another person. They have stood in the presence of finality. And afterward, something changes, something subtle, something permanent. The prevailing theory among unspeakables suggests that witnessing death alters the observer in a fundamental way. Perhaps the mind becomes receptive to frequencies it could not previously perceive. Perhaps the soul itself undergoes a transformation. Or perhaps death leaves behind a kind of scar, an invisible mark that allows the veil to recognize those who carry it. Nobody knows. And that uncertainty is precisely what makes the phenomenon so compelling. The voices themselves offer few clues. They do not communicate clearly. They do not answer questions. They do not provide wisdom. They whisper. Always whisper. Soft enough to remain indistinct. Persistent enough to remain impossible to ignore. Many who have heard them describe an overwhelming urge to move closer. Not because the voices command them. Because they promise something. Not explicitly. Not through words. But through implication. The implication that understanding waits beyond the veil. The implication that answers exist just out of reach. The implication that the boundary separating life from death may not be as absolute as everyone assumes. And that possibility is extraordinarily dangerous, because curiosity has always been one of humanity's strongest weaknesses. The desire to know what lies beyond the next hill, beyond the next door, beyond the next mystery. The veil seems designed to exploit that desire, not aggressively, patiently. It waits, it whispers, and it allows imagination to do the rest. The physical nature of the archway only deepens the mystery. Attempts to identify the stone from which it was carved have failed. The material does not appear anywhere else in the known magical world. It resists analysis. It resists classification. It simply exists, as though it belongs to a category entirely of its own. Even more remarkable are reports that the archway cannot be moved. Researchers have attempted various methods throughout history. Powerful spells, magical machinery, experimental enchantments. Nothing works. The structure remains fixed in place. Unmovable. Permanent. Almost as though the chamber was constructed around it, rather than the other way around. This possibility raises troubling questions. If the archway predates the Ministry who built it, why was it created? What purpose did it originally serve? And perhaps most importantly, who understood enough about death to construct something like it in the first place? Because someone clearly did. Ancient magical civilizations possessed knowledge that has since been lost. Fragments survive in legends. Fragments survive in artifacts. Fragments survive in places like Hogwarts and the Department of Mysteries, but the complete picture remains hidden. The veil may represent one of those lost fragments, a surviving piece of knowledge from an era when magic operated according to principles modern wizards barely comprehend. If that is true, then the implications are enormous. It would mean the archway was never intended as a research object. It would mean it had another purpose forgotten long ago. Some researchers believe the chamber was originally designed for communication rather than execution, a place where the living attempted contact with the dead, a shrine, a meeting point, a bridge between worlds. The theory sounds unbelievable, yet alternative explanations are equally difficult to accept. Because if the veil is merely a magical execution device, why do voices emerge from beyond it? Why does it inspire fascination rather than simple fear? Why does it appear to preserve a connection with whatever lies on the other side? These questions become impossible to ignore when considering the most famous event associated with the archway. The disappearance of Sirius Black. His fall through the veil transformed the mystery forever. Before that night, the archway remained largely confined to academic debate. Afterward, it became personal, real, immediate. For Harry Potter, the veil was no longer an abstract phenomenon. It became the place where someone he loved vanished without explanation, without a body, without closure, without certainty. And certainty matters. Human beings crave endings. We want clear conclusions, clear answers, clear explanations. The veil provides none of those things. It offers only absence. Those who pass through do not return. Their bodies are not recovered. Their fate cannot be confirmed. They simply disappear. And that disappearance creates a unique kind of horror, not the horror of death, the horror of uncertainty. Because uncertainty allows imagination to flourish. Perhaps the person is gone forever. Perhaps they continue elsewhere. Perhaps consciousness survives. Perhaps memory survives. Perhaps something survives. The whispers encourage such speculation. Every murmur drifting from beyond the veil seems to suggest that the story does not end there, that another chapter exists somewhere beyond reach. The Ministry officially avoids such conclusions. It prefers caution, observation, documentation. Yet even the unspeakables cannot fully dismiss the possibility. After centuries of study, they remain trapped in the same position as everyone else. Listening, wondering, waiting. The veil has never explained itself. It has never revealed its secrets. It remains exactly as it has always been. Silent, patient, ancient. And perhaps that patience is what makes it so unsettling. Because while generations of researchers have come and gone, the archway remains, watching, waiting, listening, as though it knows something humanity does not, as though it has witnessed countless lives pass before it, as though it understands a truth hidden from every living witch and wizard. But the veil is only one mystery connected to death. Far from the Ministry, far from London, far from the halls of Hogwarts, there exists another monument to mortality, another place where darkness accumulated for centuries, a place whose history is so disturbing that official records remain heavily restricted even today. An island hidden within the cold waters of the North Sea, an island where suffering became so concentrated that it may have changed reality itself. An island that would eventually become known as Azkaban, and the story of how that island came to exist may be even more disturbing than the whispers beyond the veil. The veil whispers. The Department of Mysteries listens. And beneath layers of ministry secrecy, the questions remain unanswered. But there is another mystery in the wizarding world that feels somehow older, darker, more tangible. Unlike the veil, which exists behind locked doors and hidden corridors, this mystery rises from the sea itself. It stands against crashing waves and endless storms. A fortress of black stone, a monument to suffering, a place whose very name inspires dread. Azkaban. Most witches and wizards know Azkaban only as a prison, a place where dangerous criminals are sent, a place guarded by dementors, a place from which escape was once considered impossible. But prisons are built. They are designed. Someone chooses their location. Someone lays their foundations. Someone decides where walls should stand. Azkaban is different, because the Ministry of Magic did not create Azkaban. They inherited it, and that fact alone should raise uncomfortable questions. Imagine discovering an isolated fortress in the middle of the North Sea. A fortress nobody remembers building, a fortress hidden from maps, a fortress so disturbing that even experienced investigators struggle to describe what they found inside. Most governments would destroy such a place. Most authorities would erase it. Most leaders would ensure nobody ever entered it again. The Ministry chose another path. They preserved it. They occupied it. And eventually they transformed it into the most feared prison in the wizarding world. Why? The official explanation has always been practical. Azkaban was isolated, secure, remote, difficult to escape. But official explanations often leave out the most important details. Because long before prisoners arrived, long before dementors became guards, long before Ministry officials established control, the island belonged to a wizard named Ekrizdis, and almost everything about him remains hidden behind silence. The surviving records are astonishingly sparse. A name, a century, a location, little else. It is as though someone deliberately removed him from history. Not merely forgotten him, erased him. Historians occasionally encounter gaps in documentation. Entire chapters vanish from the historical record, but the absence surrounding Akrisdis feels different. Intentional. Purposeful. The kind of absence created when people decide that certain information should never be widely known. That decision alone tells us something important. Whatever occurred on that island frightened powerful people. Powerful enough to influence historical memory itself. According to surviving accounts, Akrisdis lived during the 15th century. He sought neither fame nor political influence. He did not attempt to conquer magical governments. He did not lead armies. He did not establish movements. Instead, he pursued isolation. Complete isolation. He selected one of the most remote locations imaginable, a rocky island surrounded by freezing water and violent weather. Far from ordinary society, far from witnesses, far from accountability, and there he built a fortress. That decision deserves attention because people build fortresses for reasons. Protection. Defense. Security. But accounts suggest that Akrisdis was not defending himself from external threats. He was creating a laboratory, a place where experiments could occur beyond the reach of scrutiny, a place where questions could be pursued without interruption, a place where consequences could remain hidden. What exactly those experiments involved remains uncertain. The first investigators never provided complete descriptions. That omission has fueled speculation for centuries, yet fragments remain. Enough fragments to reveal the outline of something deeply disturbing. Akrisdis reportedly targeted Muggle sailors, ships traveling through northern waters, fishing vessels, merchant crews, ordinary people navigating dangerous seas. Somehow those ships began finding their way toward the island. Sometimes during storms, sometimes under unusual circumstances, sometimes after reports of strange lights appearing in the distance. The exact methods remain unclear. Perhaps illusions were involved, perhaps mind-altering magic, perhaps enchantments designed to distort navigation. Whatever the mechanism, the result remained consistent. Ships approached the island. Ships crashed, survivors disappeared, and those disappearances became the foundation of Akrisdis's work. The investigators who eventually examined the island struggled to discuss what they discovered. That detail appears repeatedly throughout surviving accounts. Not anger, not outrage, difficulty, an inability to articulate what they had witnessed. Several reportedly abandoned their careers afterward. Others refused further interviews. Some never publicly discussed the experience again. Such reactions suggest something important. People can describe violence. People can describe crime. People can describe tragedy. But certain experiences transcend ordinary language. They create a kind of psychological fracture, a conflict between what the mind witnessed and what the mind is capable of accepting. Perhaps that is what happened on the island, because evidence suggests Akrisdis was not interested in simple cruelty. Cruelty alone rarely produces such lasting effects. No. His interests appear to have centered on something far more unsettling. The nature of suffering itself, the boundaries of consciousness, the relationship between pain and the human soul. Imagine dedicating years to studying despair. Not treating it, not preventing it, studying it, measuring it, exploring its limits, investigating how much suffering a person can endure before something fundamental changes. That possibility sits at the center of nearly every theory surrounding Akrisdis. And if those theories contain even a fraction of the truth, then the island was never merely a fortress. It was an experiment, one conducted on a scale difficult to comprehend. The physical structure itself appears to reflect this darkness. Visitors consistently describe feelings of unease, a persistent sensation that something is wrong. Not visibly wrong, fundamentally wrong. The air feels heavier. The cold feels deeper. The silence feels occupied. As though the island remembers, as though the stone absorbed everything that happened within its walls. Ancient magical theory occasionally suggests that locations can retain emotional residue. Powerful events leave impressions. Repeated experiences shape environments. Joy creates one kind of imprint. Suffering creates another. If such theories contain truth, then Azkaban may represent the most extreme example ever recorded. Centuries of fear. Centuries of misery. Centuries of isolation. All concentrated within a single location. The result would be difficult to imagine. Perhaps impossible. And then Ecrizdis disappeared. Not captured. Not defeated. Simply gone. The records never explain what happened. No confirmed death. No verified disappearance. Just absence. And that absence creates yet another mystery. Because whatever he was building, whatever he was attempting, whatever conclusions he reached, he left it behind, waiting. When Ministry investigators finally arrived, they expected to find ruins. Instead, they found something much worse. The fortress remained intact. The atmosphere remained oppressive. And evidence suggested that the island itself had changed, not physically. Something deeper, something less visible. The investigators recommended destruction. That detail appears consistently throughout historical fragments. Destroy the fortress. Destroy the island. Destroy everything. Yet the Ministry refused. Why? Perhaps they feared what destruction might unleash. Perhaps they feared what they might discover beneath the foundations. Or perhaps they simply underestimated what remained there. Because Ecrizdis may have vanished, but something else had stayed behind. Something born from decades of concentrated despair. Something feeding on misery. Something waiting in the shadows of that fortress. The Ministry would eventually give those creatures a name. Dementors. And their existence would transform Azkaban from a historical curiosity into one of the darkest places in the entire wizarding world. But the true mystery is not why Dementors guard Azkaban. The true mystery is why they were there before the prison ever existed. Because according to some of the oldest theories surrounding the island, the Dementors were not brought to Azkaban. They were born there. And if that theory is true, then Ecrizdis's final experiment may have succeeded in a way nobody fully understands. A possibility so disturbing that even centuries later, the Ministry continues to keep many of the records sealed. Because the birth of the Dementors raises a terrifying question. If enough suffering can create something entirely new, what else might humanity be capable of creating without realizing it? That is the mystery we will explore next. The origin of the Dementors, the creatures that feed on happiness, the creatures that turn hope into hunger, and the possibility that they are not merely magical beings at all, but the living remains of a darkness that should never have existed. The fortress remained. The records were sealed. And the Ministry moved quickly to control the narrative. Officially, Azkaban became a prison, an isolated location where dangerous witches and wizards could be removed from society. A practical solution to a practical problem. At least, that was the explanation given to the public. But explanations often conceal as much as they reveal, because long before prisoners filled its cells, Azkaban already had inhabitants. They were not guards. They were not researchers. They were not Ministry officials. They were something else entirely. Creatures that seemed to belong to the island itself. Creatures that inspired a fear unlike any other in the wizarding world. The Dementors. Most magical creatures can be understood through observation. Dragons are dangerous, but their behavior follows patterns. Acromantulas are terrifying, but their motives remain recognizable. Even the most unusual magical beasts fit somewhere within the natural order. Dementors do not. That is what makes them so disturbing. They do not appear to belong anywhere. They have no obvious place in magical ecology. No known breeding grounds. No identifiable ancestors. No evolutionary history. No clear explanation for their existence. They simply appear. As though they emerge from a place where ordinary biological rules no longer apply. This absence of origin has fascinated researchers for centuries. Every species has a beginning. Every creature comes from somewhere. Yet when historians attempt to trace the history of Dementors, they encounter a wall, a void, a silence remarkably similar to the silence surrounding Ecrizdis himself. And perhaps that is not a coincidence, because some of the oldest theories suggest that the story of the Dementors begins with him. Not because he created them intentionally, because he created the conditions necessary for their birth. At first glance, the idea sounds impossible. How can suffering create life? How can despair become a living thing? How can emotions evolve into creatures capable of independent existence? Yet magic has always blurred boundaries that seem impossible. Thoughts can become visible, memories can be extracted. Love can create protective enchantments. Fear can influence magical objects. Emotion and magic have never been completely separate forces. They interact constantly, sometimes in ways that remain poorly understood. Now imagine centuries of concentrated misery. Imagine an island isolated from the world. Imagine thousands of acts of suffering occurring within the same walls. Imagine despair accumulating year after year, decade after decade, century after century. What happens when emotional energy reaches levels never intended to exist? That question sits at the center of the Dementor mystery. The earliest Ministry investigators described something unusual about Azkaban. Not merely cold. Cold exists everywhere. Not merely fear. Fear accompanies many dangerous locations. What they described was emptiness. A sensation of emotional depletion. A feeling that something was taking pieces of them. Not physically. Psychologically. The investigators reported intrusive sadness, sudden hopelessness, the gradual disappearance of positive thoughts. Happy memories seemed harder to access. Moments of joy became distant, as though something invisible was feeding upon them. At the time, they did not fully understand what they were experiencing. Later generations would, because this became the defining characteristic of the Dementors. They do not hunt flesh. They do not seek blood. They do not consume bodies. They consume something far more fundamental: hope, happiness, comfort, every positive emotion that makes existence bearable. Standing near a Dementor feels like watching the best moments of your life slowly fade away. Birthdays, friendships, victories, family, love, laughter. Everything bright becomes distant. Everything comforting becomes fragile, until eventually only pain remains. Only fear, only despair. This ability immediately separates Dementors from ordinary predators. Predators kill for survival. Dementors appear to feed on emotional experience itself, and that raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if they are not creatures at all? What if they are manifestations? The physical embodiment of accumulated suffering. The theory remains controversial. Yet it continues to attract attention, because alternative explanations remain remarkably weak. No one has ever discovered a Dementor nest. No one has ever witnessed traditional reproduction. No one has identified juvenile forms. No one understands how their population grows. And yet it grows. Historical records indicate increasing numbers over time, especially during periods when Azkaban housed larger prisoner populations. That detail deserves attention. Because if Dementors reproduce biologically, population growth should remain largely independent of prisoner suffering. But if their existence is tied directly to despair itself, then increasing misery could logically produce increasing numbers, an unsettling possibility. One that becomes even more troubling when considering Echrizdis. If he truly spent decades experimenting with suffering, if he truly pushed human endurance beyond known limits, then Azkaban may have become something unprecedented. A reservoir of emotional corruption, a place where despair accumulated faster than reality could process it, eventually reaching a tipping point, eventually becoming something new, something hungry, something alive. The Ministry has never officially endorsed this theory, nor has it completely dismissed it. Instead, officials typically avoid discussing the subject altogether, which may be revealing in its own way. Governments often remain silent when confronting questions they cannot answer, and the Dementors may represent exactly that kind of question. Because their existence challenges comfortable assumptions about magic, it suggests that emotions possess greater power than previously believed. It suggests that suffering leaves permanent consequences. It suggests that darkness can take shape, literally. The implications extend far beyond Azkaban. If enough misery can create Dementors, what might enough hatred create? What might enough fear create? What might enough grief create? The wizarding world rarely explores such questions publicly, perhaps because the answers would be deeply unsettling. Instead, the ministry chose containment, management, control. When officials realized that the Dementors could not easily be removed, they adapted. Rather than destroy them, they utilized them. Rather than eliminate the problem, they integrated it into the prison system. The decision remains one of the most controversial in magical history. Think about what it actually meant. The ministry effectively entered an arrangement with creatures that fed upon human suffering. Prisoners would provide emotional sustenance. The Dementors would remain confined to the island. Both sides benefited, at least temporarily, but such arrangements always carry consequences because dependence creates vulnerability. The prison became dependent upon the Dementors. The Dementors became dependent upon the prisoners, and Azkaban evolved into something far stranger than a correctional facility. It became an ecosystem. A self-sustaining cycle of despair. Prisoners generated suffering. Dementors consumed suffering. Their presence generated even more suffering, which produced more nourishment, which strengthened the Dementors, which deepened the misery. The cycle fed itself endlessly. Year after year, generation after generation. Few ministry officials seemed willing to acknowledge the ethical implications, perhaps because there were no easy alternatives. Perhaps because they feared what might happen if the arrangement collapsed. Because another terrifying possibility gradually emerged. What if the Dementors were becoming stronger? Not individually, collectively. Every prisoner sent to Azkaban contributed to the emotional reservoir sustaining them. Every broken spirit, every stolen memory, every act of despair, all feeding the same system. If the theory regarding their origin is correct, then each generation added fuel to the same fire. A fire that had been burning since the days of Akrisdis. The consequences are difficult to measure. Perhaps impossible, but certain events suggest the threat was growing. Whenever Dementors left Azkaban in significant numbers, the effects were immediate. Entire regions experienced unusual depression. Communities reported emotional instability. Hope seemed to vanish wherever the creatures gathered. It was as though darkness itself expanded outward from their presence. Not metaphorically, literally, which raises one final question. Question the ministry rarely addresses. What happens if the cycle continues indefinitely? What happens if the reservoir keeps growing? What happens if centuries of accumulated misery eventually reach another tipping point? Because history suggests that powerful magical forces rarely remain stable forever. Eventually they change. Eventually they evolve. Eventually they become something new. And if the Dementors themselves were born from such a transformation, then perhaps their story is not finished. Perhaps Azkaban remains an active experiment. An experiment nobody fully controls. An experiment that began with Akrisdis centuries ago and may still be unfolding today. But the darkness of Azkaban is not the deepest mystery in the wizarding world, because beyond suffering lies something even more disturbing. A form of magic so feared that its details remain deliberately hidden. A ritual so terrible that even discussing it makes many witches and wizards uncomfortable. A process designed not merely to escape death, but to break the human soul itself. And that brings us to one of the most forbidden subjects in magical history, the creation of a Horcrux, a secret buried so deeply that even those who study dark magic often refuse to speak about it. A mystery defined not by what we know, but by what has been intentionally left unsaid. The Dementors feed on despair. The veil whispers from beyond death, and hidden beneath layers of ministry secrecy, countless mysteries remain unresolved. Yet even among those mysteries, there exists one subject that inspires a different kind of fear. Not the fear of creatures, not the fear of death, not even the fear of the unknown. This is the fear of what a human being can willingly become. Because some of the darkest magic in the wizarding world is not created by monsters. It is created by people. People who look at mortality and decide that any price is acceptable if it means avoiding the inevitable. People who become so obsessed with survival that they willingly destroy the very thing they are trying to preserve. That obsession leads us to one of the most infamous concepts in magical history, the Horcrux. Almost every witch and wizard has heard the word. Most know that Lord Voldemort used them. Many know they involve the soul, but very few understand why the subject remains so heavily concealed. And even fewer understand the mystery that lies at its center. Because the creation of a Horcrux is not merely forbidden, it is obscured, hidden, veiled behind deliberate silence. Entire libraries contain information about dangerous spells, powerful curses, ancient rituals. Yet when it comes to Horcruxes, the details suddenly disappear. References become vague. Descriptions become incomplete. The record develops gaps, and whenever historians encounter gaps, an important question emerges. Why? What exactly is being hidden? The answer begins with a simple observation. The wizarding world possesses countless methods of causing harm. Dark wizards have invented terrible curses throughout history. They have created magical diseases. They have manipulated minds. They have summoned destructive forces. Yet Horcruxes occupy a unique category. Even among practitioners of dark magic, they are viewed with unusual horror. That distinction matters, because evil is rarely shocked by evil. Dark wizards are not easily disturbed. When something frightens people already familiar with darkness, it suggests a boundary has been crossed. A line exists, and Horcruxes exist beyond it. Most explanations begin with murder. That part is well known. To create a Horcrux, a wizard must intentionally take a life. Not accidentally, not indirectly, deliberately. The act damages the soul. This concept appears repeatedly throughout magical literature. Murder creates a wound, a fracture, a disruption, something fundamentally sacred. The soul survives. But it is no longer untouched, no longer whole. At first glance, this idea seems almost symbolic, a poetic description of guilt, a metaphor for moral corruption. But magical scholars insist the damage is literal, real, observable through magical means. Something actually changes, something permanent, and that alone is remarkable, because most injuries affect the body. Horcruxes begin with an injury to the self, an injury that cannot be seen, cannot be touched, cannot be measured by ordinary tools, yet remains undeniably present. The mystery deepens immediately afterward. Murder creates the fracture, but it does not create the Horcrux. Another step exists, another action, another process, and that process remains almost entirely absent from public knowledge. The silence surrounding it has fueled speculation for decades. Some theories are ridiculous, others are plausible. All attempt to explain the same question. How does a wizard separate part of their own soul? Think about what is being proposed. The soul is not flesh, not bone, not blood. It has no visible structure, no physical form. And yet dark magic somehow treats it like an object, something that can be divided, separated, manipulated, contained. This may be the most disturbing aspect of Horcruxes. Not immortality, not murder. The implication that the soul itself is vulnerable, that it can be damaged intentionally, that someone can learn how to tear away a piece of their own essence. The idea feels fundamentally wrong, perhaps because every culture throughout history has treated the soul as something sacred, something indivisible, something beyond ordinary interference. Horcruxes challenge that assumption. They suggest the soul possesses weaknesses, and where weaknesses exist, exploitation inevitably follows. This realization haunted Albus Dumbledore throughout his investigation of Voldemort, because Voldemort did not create one Horcrux, he created multiple, each requiring another fracture, another act of violence, another deliberate step away from humanity. The cumulative effect becomes impossible to ignore. By the end of his life, Voldemort appeared physically altered, not merely aged, transformed. His appearance reflected something deeper than cosmetic change. The damage extended beyond the soul itself. It reshaped the person, Many scholars believe this transformation reveals an important truth. The soul and the body are more connected than most people realize. Damage one deeply enough, and the other begins to change as well. If that theory is correct, then Horcrux creation represents far more than an act of magical engineering. It represents self-destruction. Gradual, voluntary, permanent. The wizard believes they are preserving themselves. In reality, they are dismantling themselves piece by piece. And that irony may be the darkest aspect of all. Because every Horcrux begins with fear. Fear of death, fear of endings, fear of uncertainty. The creator seeks permanence, yet the method guarantees fragmentation. Imagine destroying sections of a bridge in order to strengthen it. Imagine removing pieces of a foundation in order to make a building more stable. The logic feels absurd, yet Horcruxes operate according to a similar contradiction. The creator sacrifices wholeness in pursuit of survival, humanity in pursuit of longevity, identity in pursuit of continuity, and the cost appears catastrophic. The most intriguing mystery remains the missing ritual itself. Writers and historians frequently discuss its absence. The deliberate refusal to provide details, the deliberate decision to leave certain questions unanswered. Some knowledge remains incomplete, not because it was lost, because it was withheld. That distinction is important. Lost information disappears accidentally. Withheld information disappears intentionally. Someone decides the details should not be widely known. Someone decides certain instructions should remain hidden, perhaps because knowledge creates risk. Perhaps because imagination is safer than precision. Perhaps because some doors truly become dangerous once opened. Whatever the reason, the absence has become part of the mystery. People study the outline. They analyze the consequences. They examine the evidence left behind. But the central mechanism remains hidden behind a curtain of uncertainty. And uncertainty often proves more powerful than explanation, because mystery forces the mind to participate. Every listener imagines something different. Every reader fills the gap differently. The unknown becomes personalized, and personalized fears are often the most effective. Yet one question continues to dominate discussions of Horcruxes. What happens afterward? What does existence feel like for someone whose soul has been fractured repeatedly? Can they still love? Can they still feel joy? Can they still experience empathy? Or do those qualities gradually disappear? Voldemort offers an unsettling case study. His inability to understand sacrifice became one of his greatest weaknesses. He understood power, control, fear, but concepts like love and remorse remained alien to him. Perhaps because repeated fragmentation damaged more than the soul's structure. Perhaps it damaged the emotional capacities attached to it. If so, then Horcruxes create a terrible paradox. The wizard survives, but the person slowly vanishes. Longevity increases. Humanity decreases. Existence continues. Meaning erodes. And eventually the creator becomes trapped inside the very prison they constructed. A living being composed of fragments, unable to become whole, unable to move backward, unable to escape the consequences of choices made decades earlier. The Horcrux therefore represents something larger than dark magic. It represents obsession. The refusal to accept limits. The belief that mortality is a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be understood. And history repeatedly demonstrates where such thinking leads. Not toward freedom, toward corruption, toward isolation, toward transformation into something unrecognizable. Yet even Horcruxes are not the only path people have pursued in their attempts to overcome death. Because centuries before Voldemort began tearing apart his soul, another story emerged. A story involving three brothers, three artifacts, and a very different interpretation of immortality. Unlike Horcruxes, these objects did not require murder. Unlike Horcruxes, they did not require self-destruction. Yet they promised something equally extraordinary: power over death itself. Or so the legend claimed. The story has survived for generations. Most children hear it before they leave Hogwarts. Most adults dismiss it as a fairy tale, But beneath the legend lies one of the greatest mysteries in magical history. The story of the Deathly Hallows, and the question that has haunted scholars for centuries. Were they truly gifts from death itself? Or were they created by three wizards whose genius surpassed anything the world had ever seen? The Horcrux represents one path toward immortality, a path built on violence, a path sustained through fragmentation, a path that demands the destruction of the soul in exchange for survival. Yet the wizarding world contains another tradition entirely, another story, another possibility, one that has survived not through hidden documents or ministry archives, but through myth, a fairy tale, a bedtime story told to children, and like many ancient stories, it may contain far more truth than anyone initially realizes. The tale of the three brothers. At first glance, it appears simple. Three wizards encounter death itself. Death offers each brother a gift. One receives the Elder Wand. One receives the Resurrection Stone. One receives the Invisibility Cloak. The first two brothers perish because of pride and obsession. The third survives because of wisdom. The lesson seems obvious. Humility triumphs over arrogance. Acceptance triumphs over greed. A neat moral wrapped inside a magical fable. Yet something unusual happens when historians examine the story closely. The deeper they investigate, the harder it becomes to dismiss as fiction. Because unlike most fairy tales, this one leaves evidence behind. The Hallows exist, or at least objects matching their descriptions exist. The invisibility cloak passed through generations before eventually reaching Harry Potter. The Resurrection Stone emerged hidden within a golden snitch. And the Elder Wand carved a bloody path through centuries of magical history. These are not merely symbols, they are artifacts, real objects connected to real people. Which creates an uncomfortable possibility. If the objects are real, how much of the story is real as well? That question has divided magical scholars for generations. Some argue the answer is obvious. The artifacts came first. The legend developed later. Three exceptionally gifted wizards created extraordinary magical objects. Over centuries, the truth became distorted. History became mythology. Eventually, inventors became heroes, and heroes became characters in a fairy tale. This explanation appeals to rational minds. It removes the supernatural elements. It preserves logic. Most importantly, it avoids a conclusion many scholars find deeply uncomfortable. The possibility that death itself may have participated in the story, because if the tale is literally true, the implications become staggering. Death ceases to be an abstract concept. It becomes an entity, a force with awareness, intentions, purpose, a being capable of interacting with the living world. The wizarding world rarely discusses this possibility openly, perhaps because it challenges everything. Most magical theories treat death as a process. An event, a transition, not a personality, not an intelligence. Yet the legend refuses to disappear. Generation after generation continues asking the same question. What if death was real? Not metaphorically, literally. The possibility transforms the Hallows completely. They cease to be inventions. They become gifts, or perhaps tests. Because the Hallows are strange objects. Extraordinarily strange. Take the invisibility cloak. Ordinary invisibility cloaks exist throughout the wizarding world. Most eventually fail. Their enchantments weaken. Spells reveal them. Time damages them. The cloak belonging to the Peveril line behaves differently. Centuries pass. It remains unchanged. Powerful magic fails to penetrate it. Its concealment remains absolute. No known enchantment replicates its exact properties. Even today, nobody fully understands why. Then there is the Resurrection Stone, perhaps the most mysterious of all three Hallows, because it appears to violate one of the most fundamental limitations in magic, the inability to reverse death. Throughout magical history, countless witches and wizards attempted to overcome mortality. Most failed. Some created Horcruxes. Others pursued increasingly dangerous experiments. Yet none succeeded in truly restoring the dead. The Resurrection Stone occupies an unusual middle ground. It does not resurrect. Not completely, But neither does it merely create illusions. Those who encounter the stone describe something more complex. Something existing between memory and reality, between life and death. A phenomenon difficult to categorize, which leaves the Elder Wand, the most famous, the most feared, and arguably the most dangerous, because power attracts attention, always. Unlike the cloak, which conceals, unlike the stone, which tempts, the wand dominates. It exists as an expression of superiority, a promise that its owner can overcome any opponent. Such promises inevitably produce consequences, and the Elder Wand's history is drenched in those consequences. But before examining the wand itself, we must return to the brothers, because understanding the Hallows requires understanding what they represent. Most interpretations focus on their magical abilities, yet their symbolic meaning may be even more important. Each brother responds differently to mortality. The first seeks power. The second seeks reunion. The third seeks time. These responses remain remarkably familiar. Thousands of years later, humanity continues reacting to death in exactly the same ways. Some fight against it. Some refuse to accept it. Some simply hope to postpone it. The genius of the legend lies in its universality. The brothers are not merely characters. They are reflections, representations of three deeply human impulses. Antioch Peveril receives the Elder Wand because he wants victory. He wants dominance. He wants certainty that nobody can defeat him. In other words, he wants control. Control over danger. Control over rivals. Control over fate itself. His story ends predictably. Power attracts challengers. Power attracts envy. Power attracts violence. The wand grants what he requested, but not what he truly needed. Cadmus Peveril receives the Resurrection Stone. His desire is different. He does not seek conquest. He seeks restoration. Someone he loved has died. He wants them back. It is perhaps the most understandable desire in the entire story. Who has not imagined one more conversation? One more meeting? One more opportunity to say what remained unsaid? The stone appears to grant that wish. Yet the result becomes tragic, because what returns is not fully alive, not fully present. The gap between expectation and reality proves unbearable. Cadmus ultimately chooses death over separation. His story becomes a warning, not against love, against obsession, against refusing to let grief complete its natural course. Then comes Ignotus, the youngest brother, the least ambitious, the least dramatic, and ultimately the most successful. His request appears modest. A cloak, not power, not resurrection, merely concealment. For centuries, readers interpreted this literally, but many scholars believe the cloak represents something deeper. Acceptance. The willingness to live without demanding control over death. The willingness to acknowledge mortality without surrendering to fear. Unlike his brothers, Ignotus does not attempt to defeat death. He simply avoids it until the appropriate time. Then he accepts its arrival. This distinction may explain why he succeeds where the others fail. Because perhaps the Hallows were never intended as rewards. Perhaps they were lessons, tests, designed to reveal character. If so, the identity of death becomes almost irrelevant. Whether a supernatural being distributed the artifacts or three brilliant inventors created them independently, the message remains surprisingly consistent. The pursuit of power leads to destruction. The refusal to let go leads to suffering. Acceptance leads to peace. Simple lessons, yet history suggests humanity rarely learns them. Even within the wizarding world, especially within the wizarding world, because despite the warnings embedded in the legend, countless witches and wizards continued chasing mastery over death. Some pursued Horcruxes, others hunted Hallows. Many convinced themselves they would succeed where everyone else had failed. History repeatedly proved otherwise, and nowhere is that pattern more visible than in the story of the Elder Wand. Because unlike the cloak and the stone, the wand leaves behind records. Names, dates, murders, betrayals, a trail stretching across centuries. Every owner believing they had finally mastered its power. every owner eventually discovering the same terrible truth. The wand never truly belongs to anyone. It merely waits for the next victor, the next challenger, the next ambitious soul willing to pay the price. And that price has been paid in blood for generations. Which brings us to the darkest mystery surrounding the Hallows. Not whether they came from death, not whether they are real, but whether the Elder Wand possesses a will of its own. Because the more historians study its history, the harder it becomes to view it as an ordinary magical object. Its pattern is too consistent, its influence too destructive, its allegiance too unpredictable. Again and again, the wand seems to shape the fate of those who hold it, as though it is guiding events toward the same conclusion, as though it understands something its masters do not. And if that is true, then the Elder Wand may be far more than a tool. It may be one of the most dangerous intelligences ever created. That is the mystery we will explore next. The bloody history of the Elder Wand, its endless chain of betrayal, its strange rules of loyalty, and the unsettling possibility that the wand chooses its masters far more carefully than anyone realizes. The tale of the three brothers leaves us with a question that has never been fully answered. Were the Hallows gifts from death itself, or were they the creations of three wizards whose brilliance bordered on the impossible? The answer remains hidden, but one thing is certain. Of the three Hallows, only one left a trail of bodies stretching across centuries. Only one inspired betrayal after betrayal. Only one transformed ambitious witches and wizards into targets the moment they claimed it, the Elder Wand. The Wand of Destiny. The Death Stick. A weapon so feared that its history reads less like a record of magical ownership and more like a catalogue of murder. At first glance, the Elder Wand appears simple. It is a wand. Powerful, certainly. Unique, undoubtedly. But still a wand. And that assumption has misled countless people throughout history. Because the Elder Wand does not behave like other wands. Ordinary wands form relationships. They choose owners. They develop loyalties. Over time, a bond forms between wand and wizard. The relationship becomes almost personal. The Elder Wand rejects that principle entirely. Its loyalty is conditional, temporary, transactional. And that single difference may explain nearly every tragedy associated with it. The wand respects only one thing: victory. Nothing else matters. Not affection. Not experience. Not sacrifice. Not friendship. Victory. The moment another witch or wizard successfully overcomes its current master, the wand begins to shift its allegiance. Coldly. Instantly. Without hesitation. Imagine possessing a magical tool that constantly evaluates whether someone stronger deserves ownership. Imagine carrying an object that never truly trusts you. An object that remains loyal only until someone proves superior. Such a relationship would be unstable by design, and instability has defined the Elder Wand's entire history. Many magical historians believe this strange behavior reveals something important about its origins, because, unlike ordinary wands, the Elder Wand appears to possess a personality, not consciousness in the human sense. Something stranger, a kind of magical instinct, a preference, a set of priorities. The wand seeks power, recognizes power, rewards power. Again and again, ownership transfers not to the wisest wizard, not to the most ethical wizard, not even necessarily to the most skilled wizard. It transfers to whoever wins. That simple rule has shaped centuries of bloodshed. The earliest confirmed owners remain difficult to verify. Records from that period blend history and myth so thoroughly that separating them becomes nearly impossible. Names appear. Stories emerge, then disappear. Yet a pattern quickly becomes visible. Every owner believes they have achieved something extraordinary. Every owner believes they have secured ultimate power, and every owner eventually learns the same lesson. Power attracts challengers. The wand's reputation grew rapidly. Word spread. Stories circulated. Rumors multiplied. Some claimed it could defeat any opponent. Others insisted it guaranteed victory. Many believed possession alone made someone invincible. Such beliefs created a dangerous cycle. The more famous the wand became, the more people wanted it. The more people wanted it, the more violence followed. Soon, ownership itself became a liability. The wand transformed its masters into prizes, targets, obstacles standing between ambitious individuals and legendary power. One of the earliest figures connected to the wand was a wizard known as Emeric the Evil. Even his title reveals something about his reputation. Historical accounts describe him as ruthless, powerful, feared. For a time, he appeared unstoppable. The wand amplified his abilities. His victories accumulated. His confidence grew. Perhaps that confidence eventually became arrogance, because another wizard challenged him, a wizard named Egbert. Their confrontation has become part of magical history, not because of its details. Most details have been lost, but because of its outcome. Emeric fell. The wand changed hands, and the pattern began again. This cycle repeated endlessly, generation after generation, owner after owner, each believing they would finally break the chain, each discovering that the chain existed precisely because of the wand itself. The Elder Wand creates ambition, not directly. Indirectly, its existence inspires desire. People hear the stories. They imagine themselves wielding unmatched power. They convince themselves they deserve it. Then they act. And when enough ambitious people pursue the same prize, violence becomes inevitable. Some historians compare the wand to a crown. Others compare it to a throne. Both comparisons miss something important. Crowns and thrones remain passive. The Elder Wand seems active, not physically, psychologically. Its influence shapes decisions. It encourages obsession. It transforms sensible people into risk-takers. And perhaps most importantly, it convinces owners they are different from everyone who came before. This may be its most dangerous quality, the illusion of exception. Every master studies the wand's history. Every master sees the pattern. Every master understands the risks. Yet every master secretly believes they will be the exception. The one person capable of controlling what others could not. The one person intelligent enough to avoid previous mistakes. The one person destined to succeed. History repeatedly demonstrates otherwise. One particularly revealing example comes from the wizard Godelot. Unlike many owners, Godelot did not simply use the wand. He studied it, obsessed over it, attempted to understand its deeper nature. He wrote extensively, recorded theories, analyzed behavior, convinced himself that knowledge would provide protection. If he understood the wand completely, surely he could avoid its curse. Yet understanding proved insufficient. His own son eventually overpowered him. The wand transferred allegiance. Another tragedy joined the growing list. The lesson should have been obvious. Knowledge alone changes nothing. The wand does not care how well you understand it. The wand does not reward wisdom. It rewards victory. And victory is always temporary. This realization has led some scholars toward a disturbing conclusion. Perhaps the Elder Wand was never intended to provide power. Perhaps it was designed as a test. Think about its behavior. The wand grants extraordinary ability, then creates circumstances guaranteeing conflict. Conflict produces challenges. Challenges produce violence. Violence produces new owners. The cycle continues indefinitely. What if that cycle is the point? What if the wand functions exactly as intended? Such theories gain support when examining the later stages of its history, because eventually the Elder Wand attracted one of the most dangerous wizards who ever lived, Gellert Grindelwald. Unlike previous owners, Grindelwald understood the symbolic power of the wand. He recognized that legends possess influence beyond magical ability. People follow myths, fear myths, believe myths. The wand became a centerpiece of his rise, a symbol of authority, a symbol of destiny, a symbol of inevitable victory. For years, it seemed to work. Grindelwald accumulated followers, expanded influence, reshaped magical politics across Europe. Many believed his power was unstoppable. History had heard that claim before. Eventually, another wizard emerged. Albus Dumbledore. Their duel became legendary. Perhaps the most famous magical confrontation in modern history. Details remain uncertain. Accounts differ. Witnesses contradict one another. But the outcome remains clear. Dumbledore won. The Elder Wand changed masters once again, and once again the cycle continued. Yet Dumbledore represented something unusual. Unlike previous owners, he understood the danger. He knew the wand's history. He knew its pattern, and perhaps most importantly, he did not trust himself completely. That distinction matters. Most owners viewed the wand as an opportunity. Dumbledore viewed it as a burden, a responsibility, possibly even a threat. For years he attempted to contain its influence, to prevent history from repeating itself. Eventually he developed a plan designed to break the cycle permanently. He intended to die undefeated. If no one conquered him, the wand's allegiance would end with him. Its power would disappear. Its bloody history would finally conclude. The plan was elegant, logical, carefully constructed, and it failed. Not because Dumbledore miscalculated, because the Elder Wand follows rules stranger than anyone anticipated. A single act changed everything. A disarming spell, a brief moment on the astronomy tower. Draco Malfoy succeeded where countless others had failed. He defeated Dumbledore. Not through murder, not through superior power, through victory. And victory was all the wand required. Allegiance shifted again. Quietly. Instantly. Unnoticed. The consequences would not become clear until much later. By then, another wizard had unknowingly entered the chain. Harry Potter. And through Harry, the Elder Wand would face something it had never encountered before. A master who did not want it. A master who did not seek power. A master willing to walk away. Whether that choice truly ended the wand's influence remains uncertain. Legends rarely disappear so easily. Artifacts with such histories rarely vanish completely. And somewhere in the shadows of magical history, questions still remain. Questions about allegiance. Questions about power. Questions about whether the wand's story is truly finished. But before we can answer those questions, we must turn our attention to another Hallow. One far less violent, yet perhaps even more tragic. Because while the Elder Wand promises power, the Resurrection Stone promises something infinitely more tempting. The chance to see the dead again, and that promise has broken more hearts than any curse ever could. The Elder Wand promises victory. The invisibility cloak offers protection, but the Resurrection Stone appeals to something far more powerful than either: grief. Because throughout human history, people have pursued many things: power, knowledge, wealth, immortality, yet few desires rival the longing to see someone we have lost, to hear their voice again, to ask one more question, to say one final goodbye. The Resurrection Stone exists at the center of that longing, and that is precisely what makes it so dangerous. At first glance, the stone appears almost merciful. Unlike the Elder Wand, it leaves no trail of blood. Unlike Horcruxes, it demands no acts of cruelty. Unlike the veil within the Department of Mysteries, it does not separate people from those they love. Instead, it appears to offer the opposite: connection, reunion, a bridge between the living and the dead. For many witches and wizards, that possibility feels irresistible. After all, death is perhaps the oldest mystery in existence. Entire civilizations have been built around understanding it. Religions, philosophies, legends. Every culture eventually asks the same question: what happens afterward? The Resurrection Stone seems to provide an answer, or at least the illusion of one. That distinction matters, because the stone does not truly reverse death. It does not restore life. It does not rebuild flesh. It does not return the dead to the world they left behind. What it creates is something far more complicated, something far more unsettling: an echo. This is where the mystery begins. Most magical objects have clear functions. A broom flies. A wand channels magic. A time turner manipulates chronology. The resurrection stone refuses such simple classification. Those who use it consistently describe experiences that challenge ordinary definitions. The figures who appear are recognizable. They speak. They remember. They respond. And yet they remain fundamentally different from living people. Present, but distant. Visible, but untouchable. Real, but incomplete. It is as though the stone summons individuals from somewhere just beyond reach. A place close enough to observe, yet too far away to fully return. Many scholars believe this ambiguity is intentional, because the stone's true purpose may not be resurrection at all. Its true purpose may be temptation. Consider the psychology involved. The dead do not return because strangers miss them. They return because loved ones call them. People experiencing grief. People carrying regret. People struggling with absence. In other words, individuals already vulnerable. Already searching for comfort. Already willing to believe. The stone appears precisely when emotions are strongest. And emotions influence perception. That is an important detail. Because grief changes how people see the world. Memories become idealized. Flaws disappear. Conversations become reconstructed. The mind edits the past, refines it, polishes it. Over time, people often remember not who someone was, but who they wished they had been. This creates a fascinating question. When the resurrection stone summons someone, who exactly appears? The actual person? Or the memory carried by the user? The distinction may be impossible to answer, and perhaps that uncertainty explains why the stone remains so dangerous. Because if the figures are truly the dead, then death itself becomes less absolute than previously believed. But if the figures are shaped by memory, then users may be interacting with their own longing, their own hopes, their own inability to let go. Either possibility is unsettling. The legend of Cadmus Peveril illustrates this perfectly. According to the story, Cadmus was deeply in love. Then tragedy struck. The woman he intended to marry died before they could share a life together. Loss transformed him. Grief consumed him. Like countless people before and after, he became obsessed with undoing the irreversible. When death offered him a gift, his request reflected that obsession. He wanted her back. Not wealth. Not power. Not protection. Her. The resurrection stone granted the wish. Or appeared to. The woman returned. She spoke. She appeared before him. And for a brief moment, the impossible seemed possible. Yet something was wrong. Something remained missing. The stories vary regarding the details. Some describe her as sorrowful. Others describe her as distant. Others suggest she seemed trapped between worlds. Regardless of interpretation, the outcome remains consistent. Cadmus quickly realized she was not truly part of the living world anymore. The gap between them remained invisible, permanent, uncrossable. That realization destroyed him, because the stone had given him exactly enough to deepen his suffering. Enough hope to prevent acceptance. Enough presence to intensify absence. Enough comfort to create dependency. And perhaps that is the stone's cruelest characteristic. It never fully satisfies. It only prolongs longing. Instead of helping people move through grief, it encourages them to remain inside it. Imagine receiving brief visits from someone you lost. Not permanently. Not completely. Just enough to remind you of what is missing. Again. And again. And again. Would you ever stop using the stone? Could you? Many scholars believe most people would eventually become trapped. Not physically. Emotionally. The stone becomes less a magical object and more a psychological prison. One built from memory. One sustained by hope. One strengthened through love. The danger becomes even more apparent when examining Harry Potter's experience. Unlike Cadmus, Harry did not use the stone to avoid grief. He used it while preparing for death. As he walked toward Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, he turned the stone in his hand. The figures who appeared were familiar. His parents. Sirius Black. Remus Lupin. People he had loved, people he had lost. And the encounter remains one of the most mysterious moments in wizarding history. Because what exactly happened? Were those truly the spirits of the dead? Did Harry briefly interact with an afterlife? Or did the stone draw upon memory and emotion to create something else entirely? The text never provides certainty, and that absence feels deliberate. The uncertainty becomes the point, because certainty would reduce the mystery. The wizarding world rarely provides clear answers regarding death. The veil remains unexplained. Ghosts remain incomplete. The Department of Mysteries continues its research without conclusions. The Resurrection Stone follows the same pattern. It offers glimpses, not explanations, suggestions, not proof. Perhaps because some questions cannot be answered directly, or perhaps because answers would fundamentally change the world. Either way, the mystery remains, and that mystery reveals something important about the Hallows themselves. Each Hallow addresses a different human fear. The Elder Wand addresses vulnerability, the desire to never lose. The Resurrection Stone addresses grief, the desire to never let go. The Invisibility Cloak addresses mortality, the desire to avoid death altogether. Together, they form a map of human anxiety, a collection of responses to the same inevitable reality. And among them, the stone may be the most emotionally powerful, because almost everyone can imagine wanting it. Few people crave ultimate magical power. Few people dream of legendary weapons. But nearly everyone has lost someone. Nearly everyone understands absence. Nearly everyone has wished for one more conversation, one more chance, one more moment. The stone transforms that wish into possibility, and possibility is often more dangerous than certainty, especially when certainty involves loss. The deeper scholars study the Resurrection Stone, the more another question emerges. What happens to those who repeatedly use it? Does the boundary between life and death begin to blur? Does attachment deepen? Does reality become less appealing than memory? No definitive answers exist, but historical patterns suggest caution. Because every story connected to the stone ends similarly. Not with peace, not with closure, but with longing. A longing that eventually consumes the user. Perhaps the stone was never meant to restore the dead. Perhaps it was designed to teach a lesson. The same lesson embedded throughout the Hallows. That some things cannot be conquered, some things cannot be controlled, and some forms of acceptance require letting go. Yet there remains one final Hallow, one final mystery, and unlike the wand or the stone, this artifact leaves behind almost no tragedy at all, no bloodshed, no obsession, no broken hearts, only survival. The Invisibility Cloak. The object carried by Ignotus Peverell, the brother who succeeded where the others failed. The brother who did not attempt to master death. The brother who simply chose to live, and hidden within that choice may be the true meaning of the Deathly Hallows themselves. The Elder Wand promises power. The Resurrection Stone promises reunion, but the third Hallow is different. It makes no grand claims. It offers no conquest. It grants no visions of the dead. At first glance, it appears almost insignificant compared to its legendary counterparts. A cloak, nothing more. No dazzling magical effects, no terrifying reputation, no trail of bodies stretching across history, just a simple black cloak passed from one generation to another. And yet many scholars believe it may be the most extraordinary object ever created. Because unlike the other Hallows, the Invisibility Cloak succeeds. The Elder Wand corrupts. The Resurrection Stone deceives. The Invisibility Cloak simply works. Century after century, generation after generation, without demanding anything in return. This distinction has fascinated magical historians for hundreds of years. The Hallows are often grouped together as equal artifacts, 3 pieces of a single legend, 3 gifts from death, 3 creations of the Peverell brothers. Yet when examined closely, one of them feels fundamentally different. The Elder Wand attracts violence. The Resurrection Stone encourages obsession. The Invisibility Cloak seems almost humble by comparison, which raises an intriguing possibility. What if the cloak is the true center of the legend? What if the story was never about power over death? What if it was about understanding death instead? To explore that question, we must begin with Ignotus Peverell. the youngest of the three brothers, the least dramatic, the least ambitious, and perhaps the wisest. Unlike Antioch, he did not ask for a weapon. Unlike Cadmus, he did not ask for the impossible. His request appears remarkably simple. He wanted a way to avoid death's attention. Not forever, just for a while. This detail often goes unnoticed. Ignotus did not seek immortality, he sought time. More specifically, he sought the freedom to live his life before confronting the inevitable. The difference is subtle, but important, because the other brothers attempted to overcome death. Ignotus merely postponed the meeting. And according to the legend, that decision changed everything. Death granted him a cloak woven from invisibility itself, a garment capable of hiding its wearer completely, not merely from people, from death. At least according to the story. Most readers interpret this symbolically, yet the cloak itself creates problems for purely symbolic interpretations. Because it exists, and its properties are unlike anything else in the wizarding world. Ordinary invisibility cloaks are common. Many witches and wizards own them. Most function through enchantments, powerful charms woven into fabric. Useful, effective, temporary. Eventually those enchantments fail. Time erodes them. Magic weakens. Damage accumulates. Detection spells become increasingly effective. No invisibility cloak lasts forever. Except one. Harry Potter's cloak behaves differently. It does not degrade. It does not weaken. It does not lose effectiveness. Centuries have passed since its creation. Yet it remains perfect. The fabric has survived generations of use. Powerful magic struggles to penetrate its concealment. Even magical creatures capable of detecting hidden individuals often fail to notice its wearer. No other invisibility cloak possesses such characteristics. And that uniqueness presents a problem. Because if the cloak is merely a magical object, it exceeds every known standard. Its creator possessed knowledge lost to history. Knowledge so advanced that modern magical society remains unable to replicate the result. This observation supports the theory that the Peverils were extraordinary inventors, perhaps the greatest magical innovators who ever lived. Yet another possibility remains. What if the legend contains more truth than historians wish to admit? What if the cloak genuinely hides people from forces beyond ordinary perception? The question becomes even more interesting when examining its role throughout history. Unlike the Elder Wand, the cloak rarely attracts attention. Unlike the Resurrection Stone, it rarely inspires obsession. Its owners generally live normal lives. They pass the artifact to descendants. The artifact continues quietly existing. This pattern seems almost intentional, as though the cloak protects not only its wearer, but also itself. Remaining unnoticed. Remaining forgotten. Remaining outside the conflicts surrounding the other Hallows. There is wisdom in that. Power often attracts enemies. Visibility attracts attention. Attention creates risk. The cloak avoids all three. Perhaps that is why it survives. Perhaps survival itself is the lesson. Because when people discuss the Hallows, they often focus on mastery over death. The phrase appears repeatedly. Master of Death. A title surrounded by mystery. A title pursued by powerful witches and wizards. A title interpreted in countless ways. Yet the story of Ignotus suggests something unexpected. The Master of Death may not be someone who conquers death at all. The Master of Death may be someone who understands it. Consider the fate of the brothers. Antioch seeks dominance. He dies violently. Cadmus seeks restoration. He dies tragically. Ignotus seeks time. He lives fully. Only one brother achieves peace. Only one reaches old age. Only one eventually greets death willingly. The contrast feels deliberate. The lesson almost impossible to ignore. Power fails. Obsession fails. Acceptance succeeds. This interpretation transforms the entire legend. The Hallows cease to be tools. They become philosophical symbols. 3 responses to mortality. 3 attempts to solve the same problem. 3 outcomes revealing 3 different truths. And perhaps the most important truth is this. Death cannot be defeated, not permanently. Every effort to achieve permanent victory eventually collapses. Horcruxes create hollow immortality. The Elder Wand creates endless conflict. The Resurrection Stone creates endless longing. Again and again, magical history arrives at the same conclusion. The pursuit itself becomes the trap. This may explain why Albus Dumbledore became so fascinated by the Hallows. Unlike Voldemort, Dumbledore eventually recognized the pattern. He understood the temptation, understood the dangers, understood the illusion. The Hallows appear to offer control. In reality, they reveal limitations. The Elder Wand teaches the limits of power. The Resurrection Stone teaches the limits of grief. The Invisibility Cloak teaches the limits of fear. Together, they form a kind of philosophical journey, a progression toward acceptance. And acceptance remains one of the most difficult lessons in the wizarding world. Because magic encourages control. Problems can often be solved. Injuries can often be healed. Obstacles can often be overcome. Over time, powerful witches and wizards begin believing every challenge possesses a solution. Every limitation can be removed. Every rule can be broken. Death becomes the final challenge, the final puzzle, the final enemy. The Hallows suggest otherwise. They imply that wisdom lies not in conquering mortality, but in understanding it. This idea connects strangely with another mystery we encountered earlier, the veil within the Department of Mysteries. That ancient archway remains unexplained. Researchers study it endlessly, yet certainty remains impossible. The veil appears to represent a boundary, a transition, a threshold separating known existence from whatever lies beyond. The Hallows address that same boundary from another direction. Instead of studying death, they interact with it. The wand fights against it. The stone reaches toward it. The cloak avoids it, yet none eliminate it. The boundary remains. The mystery remains. And perhaps that is the point. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some mysteries exist to be acknowledged. The wizarding world often struggles with this idea. Researchers continue searching. Unspeakables continue investigating. Historians continue debating. Yet, after centuries of study, the most fundamental questions remain unchanged. What happens after death? Can consciousness survive? Where do souls go? Does the veil lead somewhere? Do the Hallows reveal hidden truths? No definitive answers exist. Only clues. Only fragments. Only possibilities. And among those possibilities, one interpretation continues to stand apart. Perhaps the Master of Death is not someone who possesses all three Hallows. Perhaps the Master of Death is someone who no longer needs them. Someone who understands that power cannot save them. Someone who understands that memory cannot replace reality. Someone who understands that fear cannot prevent the inevitable. Someone willing to live fully and then let go. Just as Ignotus Peverell supposedly did centuries ago. But even if that interpretation is correct, another mystery remains unresolved. Because while the Hallows explore death itself, there exists another branch of magic that explores something equally dangerous. Time. And unlike death, time possesses a unique property. It can move backward. Or at least that is what the Ministry once believed. Deep within the Department of Mysteries, hidden among countless secrets, researchers spent decades studying devices capable of manipulating chronology itself, the time turners. Tiny magical instruments capable of altering events, changing perspectives, and perhaps changing history. Their existence raises questions so dangerous that even the Ministry eventually restricted access. Because once time becomes flexible, reality itself becomes uncertain, and uncertainty can be far more dangerous than death. That is the mystery we will explore next. The impossible paradoxes of time turners, the hidden experiments within the Department of Mysteries, and the terrifying possibility that history may be far less permanent than anyone believes. Death is often described as the greatest mystery in the wizarding world. The veil remains unexplained. The Hallows remain debated. The Department of Mysteries continues searching for answers that have remained elusive for centuries. Yet there is another force that rivals death in both complexity and danger. Time. Unlike death, time appears familiar, predictable, reliable. Every living creature experiences it. Every day unfolds according to its steady rhythm. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon becomes evening. The future becomes the present. The present becomes the past. Simple, orderly, comforting. At least on the surface, because deep within the Department of Mysteries, researchers discovered something unsettling. Time is not nearly as stable as most people believe. In fact, there are moments when it appears disturbingly fragile. Moments when the boundaries separating past, present, and future begin to blur. Moments when reality itself seems vulnerable to alteration. That discovery eventually led to one of the most controversial magical inventions ever created, the time turner. At first glance, the device appears harmless, small, elegant, almost insignificant. A delicate hourglass, suspended within a rotating frame. Few people seeing one for the first time would suspect its true purpose. Yet hidden within that tiny object is the ability to manipulate one of the most fundamental forces in existence: time itself. The implications are staggering. Consider what even a few minutes of temporal control would allow. Miss an important conversation? Try again. Arrive late to an event. Correct the mistake. Need additional hours in a day? Create them. The possibilities seem endless. Perhaps that is why time turners fascinated the ministry for so long. Initially, they appeared useful, practical, even beneficial. Certain educational programs employed them. Special research projects relied upon them. Carefully monitored experiments explored their capabilities. Everything seemed manageable, until researchers began encountering paradoxes. And paradoxes are dangerous things, because they reveal weaknesses in reality. Imagine traveling backward through time and altering an event. What happens afterward? Does history change? Does the original timeline disappear? Do both timelines continue existing simultaneously? These questions seem theoretical, philosophical, abstract, until someone actually acquires the ability to test them. The ministry quickly discovered that temporal manipulation produces consequences far beyond ordinary magical risks. A failed spell may injure a wizard. A failed potion may create chaos. A failed experiment involving time can threaten causality itself, and causality is the invisible framework holding reality together. Cause, effect, action, consequence. Remove those relationships and the world begins to lose coherence. This realization transformed time turners from useful tools into objects of concern. Because while traveling through time appears simple in theory, the experience introduces enormous complications. Take a moment to imagine encountering yourself, not metaphorically, literally, standing face to face with another version of yourself from a different point in the same day. The psychological impact alone would be immense: confusion, fear, disorientation, questions without answers. Now imagine accidentally interfering with your own actions. Imagine preventing something that already happened. Imagine witnessing an event before you experience the circumstances leading to it. Suddenly, the straightforward flow of cause and effect begins to collapse. The wizarding world learned this lesson repeatedly. Many early temporal experiments ended poorly. Records remain heavily restricted, but fragments suggest researchers encountered situations they could neither explain nor fully reverse. Objects appeared without origins. Events triggered themselves. Information existed without identifiable sources. Loops emerged. Closed circles of causation with no obvious beginning. These phenomena challenged basic assumptions about reality, because ordinary logic depends upon sequence. First one thing happens, then another. Time manipulation disrupts that sequence. Effects sometimes appear before causes. Knowledge sometimes appears before discovery. Actions sometimes become their own origins. The resulting paradoxes remain among the most difficult concepts in magical theory. One famous example illustrates the problem perfectly. Imagine receiving information from your future self. That information helps you avoid a mistake. Years later, you travel backward and provide the same warning to your younger self. The warning exists. The outcome changes. But where did the information originate? Not from the future. not from the past. The information appears trapped within a loop, existing without a true beginning. This phenomenon deeply unsettled many researchers, because it suggested time behaves less like a line and more like a circle. Or perhaps something even stranger. The Department of Mysteries became increasingly interested in these anomalies. Dedicated research chambers explored temporal behavior. Unspeakables developed theories. Experiments expanded. Questions multiplied. Answers remained scarce. One of the most unsettling discoveries involved human perception. People naturally assume they understand time because they experience it continuously. But temporal experiments suggested perception itself may be misleading. Past, present, future. These categories feel absolute, yet under certain magical conditions they begin to overlap. Researchers reported moments when future possibilities seemed visible, moments when past events appeared accessible, moments when chronological boundaries weakened unexpectedly. Such experiences raised disturbing questions. What if time is not moving? What if everything already exists simultaneously? Past events, present events, future events, all existing together from a perspective beyond ordinary human awareness. The theory sounds absurd, until time turners begin producing evidence that reality may be far more complicated than previously believed. Even the ministry struggled to establish clear rules. Eventually, officials adopted strict limitations. Time turners could only be used for short journeys, only under supervision, only for approved purposes. The restrictions reflected growing concern, because every successful use generated additional uncertainty. The more researchers learned, the less predictable time appeared. Then came another realization, perhaps the most frightening realization of all. Time resists interference. This observation emerged repeatedly. Attempts to dramatically alter major events often failed in unexpected ways. Circumstances shifted. Coincidences occurred. Reality seemed to correct itself. Not always. Not perfectly. But often enough to attract attention. Some unspeakables began viewing time almost as a living system. Not conscious. Not intelligent. Adaptive. Self-preserving. Capable of absorbing minor disruptions while resisting major contradictions. If true, the implications were enormous. It would mean history possesses a kind of resilience, a tendency toward stability, a tendency toward preserving itself. And yet exceptions remained, because no theory fully explained every anomaly. Certain temporal events continued defying classification. Moments when history appeared genuinely vulnerable, moments when different outcomes seemed possible, moments when the future itself appeared uncertain. The existence of such moments terrified many researchers, not because they threatened individuals, because they threatened reality. If enough changes accumulated, what would happen? Would history fragment? Would timelines multiply? Would contradictions eventually overwhelm causality? Nobody knew, and that ignorance created fear. A different kind of fear than the veil, a different kind of fear than Horcruxes. The fear that reality itself may be more fragile than it appears. This concern eventually influenced ministry policy. Time turners became increasingly restricted. Research became increasingly secretive. Access became increasingly limited. Officials recognized a difficult truth. Some knowledge creates risks simply by existing. The ability to manipulate time belongs in that category, because power over chronology is fundamentally different from ordinary magic. A curse affects a target. A potion affects a drinker. Temporal magic affects reality itself. The scale changes completely. The stakes become immeasurable. Yet despite every precaution, one question continued haunting the Department of Mysteries. If time can be manipulated, can it be controlled? Or all attempts at control merely illusions? Perhaps every temporal intervention was always part of history. Perhaps free will remains intact. Perhaps it does not. The debate continues even today. And like so many mysteries within the department, certainty remains frustratingly out of reach. The unspeakables continue studying. The records continue accumulating. The questions continue growing. Because the deeper researchers venture into the nature of time, the more they encounter another mystery waiting beyond it. Prophecy, the strange phenomenon through which fragments of the future sometimes reveal themselves, not through calculation, not through observation, but through vision, through glimpses of events that have not yet occurred. And if time itself remains uncertain, then prophecy becomes even more unsettling, because prophecy suggests the future may already exist somewhere, waiting, watching, just beyond the limits of human perception. That is the mystery we will explore next. The Hall of Prophecy, the shelves of glass orbs hidden within the Department of Mysteries, and the terrifying possibility that some futures may be written long before anyone has the chance to live them. Time challenges our understanding of reality. The veil challenges our understanding of death. The hallows challenge our understanding of mortality. Yet deep within the Department of Mysteries exists another chamber that may be even more unsettling than all of them combined. Not because it studies the past, not because it studies the dead, but because it studies the future. The Hall of Prophecy. Imagine walking through a vast circular room hidden beneath the Ministry of Magic. The air is still. The silence feels unnatural. Towering shelves stretch upward into darkness. Thousands upon thousands of glass orbs rest upon those shelves, each glowing faintly in the shadows. Each containing a prophecy, each representing a future event that someone, somewhere, foresaw before it happened. The sight alone would be overwhelming, because every orb raises the same disturbing question. If the future can be recorded, how much of it is already written? This question has haunted magical scholars for centuries. The existence of prophecy forces the wizarding world into an uncomfortable philosophical dilemma. On one hand, witches and wizards believe in choice. Choice shapes destiny. Choice determines character. Choice creates consequences. The entire moral framework of magical society depends upon free will. Yet prophecy appears to suggest something entirely different. That certain events are predetermined, that some outcomes exist before the people involved have even made their decisions. That the future, at least in part, may already be waiting. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. And the Department of Mysteries has spent generations trying to understand it. The first thing most people misunderstand about prophecy is how rare it truly is. Popular imagination often portrays seers as individuals who can effortlessly observe future events whenever they choose. The reality is very different. True prophecy is extraordinarily uncommon. Most self-proclaimed seers possess little genuine ability. Many rely upon vague predictions. Others interpret coincidences. Some simply deceive themselves. Authentic prophecy stands apart from all of these, because authentic prophecy does not seem to originate from the individual delivering it. It arrives unexpectedly. Without warning. Without conscious effort, the seer becomes less a creator and more a vessel, a messenger carrying information from a source they may not understand. This phenomenon alone creates profound questions. Where does the information come from? How can someone know something that has not happened yet? What force allows glimpses beyond the present moment? The ministry has never produced definitive answers, only theories. One theory suggests that time itself may not be linear. Past, present, future, all existing simultaneously from a perspective beyond ordinary human perception. Under rare circumstances, certain individuals become capable of briefly accessing that perspective. They do not create the future. They observe fragments of it, like someone standing on a mountain and seeing distant roads hidden from travelers below. The analogy sounds reasonable until you consider its implications. Because if the future already exists somewhere waiting to be observed, then freedom becomes complicated. Are we making choices, or merely discovering outcomes that have always been there? The Hall of Prophecy exists because the ministry never resolved this question. Instead, they began collecting prophecies, cataloging them, studying them, preserving them for future analysis. Over time, the collection grew. Thousands of predictions accumulated. Some famous, most forgotten. Each stored within its own glass sphere, each connected to specific individuals. And this introduces another Fascinating detail. Prophecies appear selective. Not everyone can access every prophecy. The orbs remain dormant to outsiders. Only those directly connected to a prophecy can safely retrieve it. Why? Nobody knows. The mechanism remains unexplained. Like so many mysteries within the department, observation exists without understanding. Researchers know the rule. They do not know the reason. Perhaps the prophecy recognizes the people involved. Perhaps some magical connection exists between prediction and subject. Whatever the explanation, the phenomenon reinforces a recurring theme. Prophecy behaves less like information and more like something alive. Not conscious, responsive, purposeful, almost as though the future protects itself. This brings us to one of the most famous prophecies ever recorded, the prophecy concerning Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort. A prediction that shaped the course of modern magical history. Yet even this famous example reveals how unreliable prophecy can be. The prediction did not provide certainty. It provided possibility. Its wording allowed multiple interpretations. Its meaning remained unclear. And most importantly, events unfolded partly because Voldemort learned about it. Think carefully about that. The prophecy influenced the future because someone believed it. The prediction altered behavior. The altered behavior helped create the outcome. Without the prophecy, events may have unfolded differently. This observation led many scholars toward a startling conclusion. Prophecies may not predict the future. They may help create it. The distinction is subtle, but important. Imagine hearing a prediction that you will someday meet a stranger on a particular road. The prediction lodges itself in your mind. Years pass. Eventually, you travel that road specifically because of the prophecy. And there, exactly as predicted, you meet the stranger. Was the prophecy correct? Yes. Did it predict the future? Perhaps. Or perhaps it caused the future. This paradox lies at the heart of prophetic magic. The future becomes tangled with awareness of the future. Prediction influences behavior. Behavior influences outcomes. Outcomes validate predictions. The cycle becomes impossible to separate, and once again, certainty disappears. The Department of Mysteries found itself confronting an unsettling possibility. Maybe prophecy and free will are not opposites. Maybe they are partners. The future exists as possibility. Human choices determine which possibilities become reality. A prophecy reveals one path, not necessarily the only path, but a path significant enough to leave an impression upon the fabric of time. The theory explains some mysteries. Not all of them, because certain prophecies appear astonishingly specific. Specific enough to suggest genuine foreknowledge. Events described years before they occur. Names predicted. Circumstances anticipated. Details confirmed. Such cases remain difficult to explain through coincidence alone. Which brings us back to the hall itself. The room containing thousands of futures, thousands of possibilities, thousands of destinies captured within fragile glass. Imagine working there. Imagine spending decades surrounded by predictions, predictions that may never happen, predictions that already happened, predictions waiting for the right circumstances to unfold. The psychological impact would be immense. Every orb represents uncertainty. Every orb represents a future not yet fully understood. And among those shelves sit prophecies connected to people who may never know they exist. Ordinary witches. Ordinary wizards. Lives influenced by predictions hidden beneath London. The thought is strangely unsettling because it suggests that unknown forces may be shaping events around us constantly. Not controlling them. Influencing them. Guiding them. Whispering possibilities into existence. The unspeakables continue studying these mysteries. Yet, after centuries of research, the most important question remains unanswered. Can prophecy be avoided? History offers conflicting evidence. Some individuals appear to escape predicted outcomes. Others seem drawn toward them despite every effort to resist. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the future is neither fixed nor completely flexible. Perhaps it exists somewhere between certainty and possibility. A landscape of branching paths constantly shifting according to human choice. If so, prophecy does not reveal destiny. It reveals potential. And potential is often more powerful than certainty, because certainty ends questions. Potential creates them. The Hall of Prophecy remains one of the most enigmatic places in the wizarding world precisely because it refuses simple answers. It contains futures, but not explanations, predictions, but not understanding, possibilities, but not certainty. And beyond those shelves lies another mystery even older than prophecy itself. A force that influences every prediction, every timeline, every life. A force the Department of Mysteries has studied longer than almost anything else. Love, not romance, not affection. Something deeper, something powerful enough to shape destiny, defeat dark magic, and protect a child from the most feared wizard in history. The Room of Love, chamber so mysterious that even the unspeakables admit they understand almost nothing about it. And perhaps that is because love may be the greatest mystery of all. The Hall of Prophecy studies the future. The Death Chamber studies mortality. The Time Room studies chronology. Each chamber within the Department of Mysteries attempts to understand a force that shapes existence itself. Yet among all the subjects investigated beneath the Ministry of Magic, none has proven more difficult to explain than love. At first glance, that may seem surprising. Love appears ordinary, familiar, universal. Every witch and wizard experiences some form of it. Friendship, loyalty, devotion, compassion, family. These emotions feel so natural that most people rarely stop to examine them. Yet the unspeakables have spent centuries doing exactly that. And despite generations of research, they remain unable to fully explain what love actually is. The existence of a dedicated chamber devoted to its study reveals something remarkable. The Ministry does not consider love merely an emotion. It considers love a force, phenomenon, a power capable of influencing reality itself. That conclusion may sound poetic, until you examine the evidence, because throughout wizarding history, love has repeatedly accomplished things that magic alone could not. It has broken curses, altered destinies, protected lives, and perhaps most famously, it saved Harry Potter before he was old enough to understand what had happened. The story has become legendary. On Halloween night in 1981, Lord Voldemort entered the Potter home. His objective was simple: kill the child. Eliminate the threat described in prophecy. The outcome should have been inevitable. Voldemort possessed extraordinary magical power. The infant possessed none. The confrontation lasted only moments. Yet something happened that violated every known rule. The killing curse failed. Not weakened. Not deflected. Failed. Completely. The curse rebounded. Voldemort was destroyed. And Harry survived. The event shocked the entire wizarding world, because nothing like it had ever occurred before. The killing curse is considered absolute. No shield charm blocks it. No ordinary defense stops it. When cast successfully, death follows. Always. Or at least that was the assumption. Lily Potter's sacrifice shattered that certainty, and the deeper scholars investigated the incident, the stranger it became. No hidden spell had protected Harry. No secret enchantment had been prepared. No magical artifact intervened. The protection emerged from a choice. A mother's willingness to die for her child. Simple. Human. Ordinary. And somehow powerful enough to overcome one of the darkest forms of magic ever created. The implications were enormous, because if love could produce measurable magical effects, then love itself demanded study. Not romanticized study. Scientific study. Systematic study. The Department of Mysteries became deeply interested. Researchers examined sacrificial protection, ancient enchantments, historical accounts describing similar phenomena. Again and again, they encountered the same problem. The results were observable. The mechanism remained elusive. This pattern appears throughout magical history. Researchers can describe what love accomplishes. They struggle to explain how it accomplishes it. Unlike spells, love resists analysis. Unlike potions, love cannot be measured. Unlike magical creatures, love cannot be classified. The more closely investigators examine it, the more mysterious it becomes. Perhaps that explains the existence of the Room of Love. Little is known about the chamber itself, even among ministry secrets. It occupies a unique position. Descriptions remain scarce. Records remain incomplete, yet scattered references suggest the room contains a powerful force sealed behind protective barriers. Something dangerous, something valuable, something poorly understood. Many historians believe the chamber contains the physical manifestation of love itself. Not love as a feeling, love as magical energy, a remarkable possibility, and one that raises countless questions. Can emotions exist independently of the people experiencing them? Can love become a force separate from individual relationships? Can it accumulate, persist, influence the world directly? The department has never publicly answered such questions. Perhaps because it cannot. The truth may be that love exists beyond conventional magical theory. This would not be unprecedented. The wizarding world already contains phenomena that defy ordinary explanation. The veil, prophecy, time, consciousness. Love may belong in the same category, a fundamental force operating according to rules humanity has not yet discovered. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when contrasted with Voldemort. Throughout his life, Voldemort pursued knowledge relentlessly. He mastered advanced magic, created Horcruxes, manipulated governments, inspired fear across an entire society. Yet one subject remained beyond his understanding: love. Not because he lacked intelligence, because he dismissed it entirely. He viewed affection as weakness, compassion as vulnerability, sacrifice as irrationality. Again and again, this misunderstanding shaped his failures. He underestimated Lily's protection. He underestimated Harry's loyalty to friends. He underestimated the willingness of ordinary people to risk everything for one another. In each case, the same pattern emerged. Voldemort understood power. He did not understand connection. And connection repeatedly defeated power. The irony is extraordinary. One of the most powerful wizards in history spent his entire life pursuing control. Yet the force that ultimately opposed him was something he considered insignificant. The Department of Mysteries likely recognized this irony long ago, which may explain why love remains such a significant area of study. Because unlike most magical forces, love behaves unpredictably. It cannot be commanded, cannot be manufactured, cannot be reliably reproduced. A spell functions consistently. Love does not. The same action can produce entirely different outcomes depending on intention. Two people may perform identical sacrifices. One creates extraordinary protection, the other creates nothing. Why? The answer remains unclear, and uncertainty frustrates researchers. Scientific inquiry depends upon repetition, consistency, predictability. Love offers none of these. Instead, it behaves almost as though it possesses its own logic, its own priorities, its own mysterious principles. This has led some scholars toward a fascinating theory. Perhaps love is not merely an emotion enhanced by magic. Perhaps it is one of the foundational forces underlying magic itself. A force existing alongside time, death, and consciousness. A force so fundamental that every magical system interacts with it, whether recognized or not. The theory remains speculative, yet certain evidence supports it. Ancient protective enchantments often involve emotional bonds. Powerful magical artifacts frequently respond to loyalty. Patronus charms draw strength from positive memories and emotional connection. Again and again, emotional forces appear linked to magical outcomes. Perhaps not accidentally, perhaps fundamentally. If true, the consequences are profound. Because it would mean the wizarding world has spent centuries studying symptoms while overlooking the source, studying spells without understanding the forces empowering them, studying magic without fully understanding why magic works at all. The Room of Love may exist because some unspeakables eventually recognized this possibility. They looked beyond enchantments, beyond rituals, beyond theory, and discovered something deeper, something older, something woven into the fabric of reality itself. Whether they found answers remains unknown. The department rarely shares conclusions. And perhaps there were no conclusions to share. Perhaps the room remains active because the mystery remains unsolved. After all, love has always resisted explanation. Poets struggle to define it. Philosophers struggle to understand it. Scientists struggle to measure it. The unspeakables appear no different. Centuries of study have produced observations, not certainty, evidence, not understanding. The deeper they investigate, the more elusive the phenomenon becomes, which may be why the Room of Love remains one of the most heavily guarded locations within the Department of Mysteries. Not because researchers fear what they know, because they fear how little they know. And beyond that chamber waits another mystery. A mystery connected not to emotion or prophecy or death, but to identity itself. The question of what consciousness actually is. What makes a person? Why memories shape reality? And how thoughts can become powerful enough to exist independently of the mind that created them. Deep within another chamber of the department float rows of human brains suspended in enchanted liquid. Silent. Watching. Waiting. And their existence raises one of the most disturbing questions in magical history. Where does consciousness end? And where does magic begin? The Room of Love confronts one of the most powerful forces in existence. The Hall of Prophecy explores the future. The Death Chamber studies the boundary between life and whatever lies beyond. Yet hidden among these mysteries is a chamber that may be even more unsettling, because it forces a question that every person assumes they already understand. What is a mind? At first, the answer seems obvious. A mind is your thoughts, your memories, your emotions, your personality, the collection of experiences that make you who you are. Simple. Or at least it appears simple until you begin examining it closely, because the deeper researchers have ventured into the nature of consciousness, the stranger it becomes. Deep within the Department of Mysteries exists a chamber unlike any other. Visitors who have entered describe rows of human brains floating inside enchanted tanks filled with a shimmering green liquid. The sight is disturbing, not because the brains appear dead, because they appear active, alive in some impossible way. Thoughts continue moving through them. Magical energy flickers across their surfaces, and according to the few documented encounters with these brains, they are capable of something deeply unsettling. They can think, even separated from the bodies that once housed them. This immediately creates a problem, because if a brain can continue functioning independently, where exactly does consciousness reside? Most witches and wizards never consider the question. Why would they? The mind feels permanent, stable, reliable. You wake each morning believing you are the same person who went to sleep. Your memories remain. Your identity remains. Your awareness remains. Continuity feels natural, yet magical history contains countless examples suggesting that identity may be far more fragile than it appears. Memories can be extracted, thoughts can be altered, personalities can be influenced, entire sections of someone's mind can disappear through magic, and still the person survives. This raises an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps consciousness is not a single thing. Perhaps it is a collection of interconnected parts, memories, experiences, emotions, instincts, beliefs, each contributing to the illusion of a unified self. The Department of Mysteries has spent centuries investigating this possibility. The floating brains are believed to be part of that research. Not trophies, not specimens. Tools. Objects through which consciousness itself can be studied. Yet the experiments conducted there remain largely unknown. The Ministry guards such information carefully, perhaps because the implications are disturbing. Imagine proving that thoughts possess physical properties. Imagine demonstrating that emotions can exist independently of the person experiencing them. Imagine discovering that consciousness extends beyond the boundaries of the human body. Such revelations would fundamentally change how the wizarding world understands life itself. And there is evidence suggesting the unspeakables may have encountered exactly those kinds of discoveries. One of the strangest recorded incidents occurred when several individuals entered the brain room during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. The brains reacted. Not passively, actively. Thoughts seemed capable of manifesting physically. Ideas became tangible. Mental constructs transformed into magical phenomena. The encounter left observers deeply unsettled because it implied something extraordinary. Thought itself might be a form of magic, not merely influenced by magic, a source of magic. This theory has gained attention among certain scholars. The argument is surprisingly simple. Every spell begins as an intention. Every magical act originates within the mind. Before a wand moves, before an incantation is spoken, before magical energy manifests, a thought occurs. Perhaps thoughts are more powerful than anyone realizes. Perhaps consciousness is not merely using magic. Perhaps consciousness generates it. The idea remains controversial, yet it explains several otherwise mysterious phenomena. Consider the Patronus charm. Its strength depends upon memory, specifically positive memory. The spell draws power from emotional experience, not from technical skill alone. Two witches may perform identical movements, speak identical words, yet achieve dramatically different results, depending on what they are thinking. Why? Traditional magical theory struggles to answer. The consciousness model provides a possible explanation. Thoughts are not passive. They possess energy, shape, influence. This concept appears repeatedly throughout magical history. Boggarts transform according to fear. Mirror enchantments respond to desire. Horcruxes interact with identity. The resurrection stone responds to longing. Again and again, mental states produce physical consequences. The pattern becomes difficult to ignore, and nowhere is that pattern more visible than in memory magic. Pensives provide perhaps the clearest example. A memory can be removed from the mind, stored externally, viewed by others, revisited years later. Think about what this means. A memory is not simply recalled. It becomes an object, something that exists independently of the person who experienced it. That fact alone challenges ordinary assumptions about consciousness. If memories can exist outside the mind, then where does the self truly reside? Inside the brain? Inside memory? Inside the soul? Or somewhere else entirely? The Department of Mysteries appears fascinated by this question, and perhaps for good reason, because consciousness occupies a unique position within magical theory. Unlike time, unlike death, unlike prophecy, consciousness is the lens through which every other mystery is experienced. Without awareness, none of the others matter. Without identity, there is no observer, no perspective, no meaning. Perhaps that is why the brain room exists, not to study intelligence, to study existence itself. The floating brains represent an attempt to isolate the fundamental mechanism behind awareness, to understand why thoughts occur, why memories persist, why identity survives change. Yet every answer seems to create additional questions. For example, what happens after death? The veil suggests something continues. Ghosts suggest something remains. The resurrection stone suggests consciousness may persist in some form. But what exactly survives? The soul? The mind? The memories? No consensus exists. The department continues searching, and the floating brains remain part of that search, silent witnesses to questions that may never be fully resolved. Some researchers believe consciousness extends beyond individual minds, a vast network connecting every living being. Others argue that identity emerges from the interaction between soul and memory. Still others suggest awareness itself may be a fundamental force of nature, as essential as time, as essential as gravity, as essential as magic. No theory has achieved universal acceptance. The mystery remains open, perhaps permanently. Because consciousness presents a unique challenge, the mind is attempting to understand itself. The observer is attempting to observe the observer, a process that may contain unavoidable limitations. No matter how advanced magical research becomes, there may always be aspects of awareness that remain inaccessible. Mysteries hidden within the act of perception itself. And if that is true, then the floating brains within the Department of Mysteries serve an important purpose. Not because they provide answers, because they remind researchers of the questions. Questions about identity. Questions about memory. Questions about existence. Questions about what it truly means to be alive. Yet, among all these mysteries, one final question continues to loom over every chamber within the department. A question connecting prophecy, death, time, love, and consciousness into a single terrifying possibility. What if the wizarding world understands far less about reality than it believes? What if every discovery made so far represents only the smallest glimpse of something vastly larger? That possibility leads us toward one of the oldest mysteries in magical history. A mystery hidden not within the ministry, but within Hogwarts itself, the Chamber of Secrets. A place that remained concealed for nearly 1,000 years, and a mystery proving that even when answers appear obvious, the truth may remain buried just beneath the surface. The Department of Mysteries studies death. It studies time. It studies prophecy, consciousness, and love. Each chamber exists because reality contains questions that remain unanswered. Yet some mysteries were never hidden beneath the ministry. Some mysteries were hidden in plain sight. Buried beneath classrooms. Buried beneath corridors. Buried beneath the feet of generations who never realized what lay below them. The Chamber of Secrets is one such mystery. For nearly 1,000 years, Hogwarts stood as the greatest magical school in the world. Students came and went. Professors taught lessons. Headmasters governed the castle. Entire generations lived within its walls. And all the while, a secret chamber remained hidden beneath the school. A chamber supposedly created by one of Hogwarts' founders. A chamber linked to fear, prejudice, and death. The story sounds almost impossible. How could a secret room remain undiscovered for centuries? How could hundreds of magical experts fail to locate it? How could a castle filled with enchantments overlook something so significant? These questions make the Chamber of Secrets far more interesting than many people realize. Because the true mystery is not the basilisk. It is the concealment. Think about the scale of Hogwarts. The castle has been explored for generations. Students wander its halls constantly. Professors dedicate entire careers to studying its structure. Magical maps exist. Maintenance spells exist. Countless renovations have occurred throughout history. And yet the chamber remained hidden. This suggests something important. The chamber was not merely concealed. It was designed to resist discovery. Salazar Slytherin understood that secrets are not protected by locks alone. Locks can be opened. Doors can be found. Maps can be drawn. True secrecy requires something deeper. A system that prevents people from even realizing there is something to search for. In that sense, the Chamber of Secrets represents one of the most successful concealment projects in magical history. The deeper scholars examine its construction, the more impressive it becomes. The entrance remained disguised. The pathways remained hidden. The mechanisms required extremely specific knowledge. Even when clues existed, they appeared meaningless to those unable to interpret them. This is the mark of sophisticated design. Slytherin did not simply hide a room, he created a puzzle capable of surviving centuries. And it worked. The chamber remained untouched while entire governments rose and fell. Wars came and went. Headmasters changed. Generations passed. The secret endured. But concealment alone does not explain the chamber's significance. To understand that, we must examine why it was built. According to legend, Salazar Slytherin disagreed with the other founders. His concerns centered on blood status. He believed magical education should be restricted, selective, exclusive. The dispute eventually became so severe that he left Hogwarts entirely. Yet before departing, he allegedly created the chamber, a hidden space containing a weapon that future generations could use. Most people stop their analysis there. They focus on the conflict, the prejudice, the basilisk. Yet another question deserves attention. Why leave a weapon behind at all? What was Slytherin truly attempting to accomplish? The traditional explanation is straightforward. He wished to purge the school. But the chamber's design suggests something more complicated, because if immediate destruction had been the goal, simpler methods existed. Far simpler. Instead, Slytherin created a system requiring activation by a future heir, a delayed mechanism, a plan dependent upon unknown events occurring centuries later. That level of patience is unusual. It suggests long-term thinking, strategic thinking, perhaps even an awareness that ideas can outlive people. And ideas are often more powerful than weapons. The chamber survived because it became a symbol, a physical representation of unfinished conflict, a reminder that the founders themselves were not united, that Hogwarts, despite its reputation, emerged from disagreement as much as cooperation. History often simplifies complex figures. Heroes become flawless. Founders become legends. The Chamber of Secrets disrupts that process. It forces us to confront a less comfortable reality. Even great institutions can emerge from deeply flawed individuals. Even visionary leaders can leave dangerous legacies behind. The chamber preserves that lesson. And then there is the basilisk, one of the most feared creatures in magical history, a serpent capable of killing with a glance. A predator hidden beneath a school filled with children. The existence of such a creature raises its own mysteries. How did it survive for centuries? How was it sustained? What magical systems preserved it? The logistics alone are astonishing. A creature of that size requires resources, space, maintenance. Yet somehow the chamber accommodated all of it. Again, the deeper we examine the mystery, the more extraordinary it becomes, because the basilisk was not merely a monster. It was evidence, proof that the chamber existed, proof that Slytherin's plans extended far beyond his own lifetime, proof that some secrets can survive almost indefinitely if protected correctly. This may be the most important lesson hidden within the chamber. Secrets possess power, not because they are unknown, because they influence events while remaining unknown. For centuries, the Chamber of Secrets shaped rumors, legends, and fears throughout Hogwarts. People discussed it, doubted it, mocked it, feared it. And all the while, the chamber remained real, silent, waiting. The truth required neither belief nor disbelief. It simply existed. And perhaps that is why the mystery remains fascinating, even after its discovery. Finding the chamber answered one question, but it created many others. Questions about history, questions about memory, questions about how much of the past remains hidden beneath familiar stories. Because if a secret of that magnitude could remain concealed for nearly 1,000 years inside the most famous magical school on Earth, what other secrets remain undiscovered? What other truths wait beneath layers of assumption and tradition? The wizarding world often behaves as though its greatest mysteries have already been solved. The Chamber of Secrets proves otherwise. Sometimes the most important mysteries are not the ones hidden in distant lands or forgotten ruins. Sometimes they exist in places people think they already understand. And nowhere is that idea more relevant than Hogwarts itself, because hidden beyond the chamber lies another mystery. A mystery involving ghosts, memories, and one of the oldest questions humanity has ever asked. What remains after death? Not prophecy, not legend, not theory. Evidence. The strange existence of Hogwarts ghosts, and the unsettling possibility that becoming a ghost may not be survival at all. Chamber of Secrets preserved a monster for centuries. The Hall of Prophecy preserved glimpses of the future. The Death Chamber preserved questions no one could answer. Yet, among all the mysteries scattered throughout the wizarding world, few are as strange as the ghosts of Hogwarts. Unlike legends, ghosts can be seen. Unlike prophecies, they can be spoken to. Unlike the veil, they appear to offer direct evidence that something survives death. At first glance, their existence seems to solve one of humanity's oldest mysteries. Death is not the end. Something continues. Something remains. The proof drifts through castle corridors every day. Nearly Headless Nick speaks with students. The Grey Lady wanders Ravenclaw Tower. The Fat Friar smiles at passing children. The Bloody Baron patrols the halls in silence. Generation after generation has grown accustomed to their presence. And perhaps that familiarity has prevented people from asking a far more important question. What exactly are ghosts? The answer appears obvious. They are the spirits of the dead. That explanation satisfies most people. Yet the more closely one examines ghostly existence, the less satisfying the explanation becomes. Because ghosts possess limitations, severe limitations. They remember their lives, they retain their personalities, they recognize familiar people and places, yet they do not truly live. They do not grow. They do not change significantly. They do not continue developing as ordinary individuals do. Instead, they appear trapped, frozen at the moment they abandon life. This observation led many magical scholars toward an unsettling conclusion. Perhaps ghosts are not survivors. Perhaps they are echoes. The distinction matters. An echo resembles the original. It preserves information. It preserves patterns. But it is not the original thing. Imagine hearing your voice reflected from a distant mountain. The sound exists. The sound resembles you. Yet no one would mistake the echo for the person who created it. Some researchers believe ghosts may function similarly. Not living souls. Residual impressions left behind by souls unwilling to move forward. This theory gains support from the ghosts themselves. When questioned about death, they rarely provide clear answers. One might expect ghosts to possess extraordinary knowledge. After all, they crossed the boundary separating life from death. Surely they understand what lies beyond. Yet they consistently demonstrate the opposite. Most know remarkably little. They cannot describe an afterlife. They cannot explain what waits beyond death. They cannot reveal hidden truths. Their ignorance is perhaps the most important clue. Because if ghosts were truly individuals returning from beyond, they should possess information unavailable to the living. Instead, they seem as uncertain as everyone else. The phenomenon becomes even stranger when examining how ghosts are created. According to magical tradition, a ghost emerges when a witch or wizard fears death so profoundly that they refuse to move on. The decision occurs at the moment of dying. A choice, conscious or otherwise, to remain. This explanation immediately raises difficult questions. Remain where? Move on to what? What exactly is being rejected? The wizarding world rarely answers these questions. Perhaps because it cannot. The process remains deeply mysterious. Yet one implication appears unavoidable. Ghosts represent an alternative, not the destination. The choice to become a ghost means declining something else, something unknown, something beyond the understanding of both the living and the dead. Nearly headless Nick provides perhaps the clearest example. For centuries, he has drifted through Hogwarts. Friendly, talkative, familiar, and yet beneath his cheerful exterior lies regret. Nick openly admits uncertainty regarding his decision. He became a ghost because he feared what came next, but fear did not provide satisfaction. It provided limitation. He remains caught between worlds, neither alive nor truly gone. His existence resembles suspension rather than survival. A pause without resolution. The Grey Lady presents another fascinating case. As the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, she possesses knowledge tied directly to one of Hogwarts' founders. She witnessed events lost to ordinary history. She carries memories centuries old. Yet despite this remarkable perspective, she remains emotionally anchored to the circumstances surrounding her death. The passage of time appears to have changed little. Centuries have passed. The wound remains. The guilt remains. The identity remains. Again, we encounter the same pattern. Preservation without growth. Continuity without progress. Existence without transformation. These characteristics suggest something profound. Life may require change. Without change, existence becomes repetition. Without growth, identity becomes static. Ghosts preserve who they were, but they struggle to become anything new. This possibility becomes even more disturbing when contrasted with the veil. The ancient archway within the Department of Mysteries appears to represent true passage beyond death. Those who pass through do not return. No ghosts emerge. No messages arrive. No explanations follow. Only silence. Perhaps that silence reveals something important. Perhaps genuine continuation requires leaving the familiar behind. Ghosts, by contrast, remain attached to the familiar. Attached to places. Attached to memories. Attached to unfinished emotions. The result may be permanence, but permanence is not always desirable. Many magical philosophers have explored this idea. Some argue that ghosts represent fear overcoming acceptance. Others view them as cautionary examples. Proof that survival alone does not guarantee fulfillment. The debate continues. And like most questions involving death, certainty remains elusive. Yet one fact remains undeniable. Ghosts do not appear happy. Not truly. They function. They socialize. They participate in castle life. But beneath the surface lies something else. A sense of incompleteness. A sense that existence has narrowed rather than expanded. A sense that an important journey was never completed. Perhaps that is why the ghosts of Hogwarts remain so fascinating. Not because they prove survival after death, because they complicate it. They force us to reconsider assumptions, to question appearances, to recognize that continuation and fulfillment may not be the same thing. The greatest mystery surrounding ghosts is not how they exist. It is what they chose to avoid. Because somewhere beyond the veil waits an answer none of them were willing to discover. And that answer connects to another mystery hidden within magical history. A mystery involving memory, identity, and the remarkable ability to preserve the past itself. The pensieve, an object capable of storing experiences outside the human mind. An object raising a question as unsettling as any ghost story. If memories can exist independently of the people who created them, then how much of a person truly lives inside their memories alone? Ghosts preserve fragments of identity. The veil hints at something beyond death. The Hall of Prophecy preserves possible futures. Yet, among all the mysteries within the wizarding world, few challenge our understanding of reality more directly than the pensieve. At first glance, the object appears deceptively simple. A shallow stone basin, ancient, unremarkable, easy to overlook among the countless magical artifacts scattered throughout history. But appearances can be misleading, because the pensieve does something that should be impossible. It removes memories from the mind, not symbolically. Literally, a witch or wizard can extract a memory, place it inside the basin, and revisit it later, as though stepping back into the past itself. The experience is unlike ordinary recollection. People do not simply remember. They observe. They walk through moments that have already happened. They witness conversations exactly as they occurred. They see details the original observer may not have consciously noticed. Every expression, every gesture, every word, preserved perfectly. The implications are staggering, because memory has always been considered one of the most fragile parts of human existence. People forget. Details fade. Events blur together. Time alters perception. The past changes inside the mind, yet the pensieve appears to bypass these limitations entirely. It preserves experience with extraordinary precision, and that immediately creates a troubling question. What exactly is a memory? Most people assume memories exist only inside the brain. Collections of information stored within the mind, personal, private, temporary. The pensieve challenges all of those assumptions. Because once a memory is extracted, it becomes something else, something independent, something capable of existing outside the person who created it. The memory survives separation. It survives storage. It survives time. In some cases, memories remain accessible decades after the individuals involved have died. Think about what that means. A person's experiences can outlive the person, long after their body disappears, long after their voice falls silent. Fragments of their perspective remain available, waiting, preserved inside silver strands of thought. This realization fascinated the unspeakables, because it blurred the boundary between memory and identity. For centuries, philosophers debated what makes a person who they are. Some argued the soul defines identity. Others believed consciousness was the key. Still others pointed toward memory. The pensieve complicated every theory. If memories can exist independently, then perhaps identity is more transferable than anyone realized. Consider a simple example. Imagine removing every memory from an individual's mind, their name, their childhood, their relationships, their experiences, everything. Would they still be the same person? Most people instinctively answer yes. Yet, Uncertainty quickly follows. Without memories, personality changes. Behavior changes. Perspective changes. Something essential seems missing. This suggests memories are not merely records. They are components. Pieces of identity itself. And if identity can be separated into pieces, then the self may be far less stable than it appears. The wizarding world provides numerous examples supporting this idea. Memory charms can alter lives completely. False memories can reshape behavior. Lost memories can transform personality. Again and again, magical history demonstrates that memory influences reality in profound ways. The pensieve simply makes this influence visible and measurable, which is precisely why researchers became so interested in it. Many scholars initially viewed the pensieve as a historical tool, a method for preserving accurate records, a defense against misinformation, a way to revisit important events, and it certainly serves those purposes. Yet deeper investigation revealed something more significant. The pensieve does not merely store information, it preserves perspective. When entering a memory, observers do not simply watch events unfold. They experience the world through the framework of another person's life. They stand inside someone else's past, someone else's reality. This distinction matters, because reality itself may be more subjective than most people realize. Two people can witness the same event and remember it differently. Different emotions, different priorities, different interpretations. Human perception filters experience constantly. The pensieve appears to capture those filtered experiences, yet even here, mysteries emerge. How accurate are preserved memories? Can memories be altered before extraction? Can bias influence what is stored? Can deception survive inside the pensieve? The answers remain complicated. Some memories appear remarkably reliable, others reveal inconsistencies. Certain individuals intentionally manipulate recollections, others unknowingly distort them. The result is unsettling. Even perfect preservation cannot guarantee perfect truth, because truth itself may depend upon perspective. This realization transformed the pensieve from a historical tool into a philosophical problem. If memories shape identity, and memories can be altered, then identity itself becomes vulnerable. The implications extend far beyond individual lives. Governments preserve records. Institutions preserve histories. Entire civilizations preserve collective memories. What happens when those memories change? What happens when the stories people tell themselves become inaccurate? The wizarding world has confronted this problem repeatedly. Legends evolve. Historical figures become mythologized. Facts disappear beneath interpretation. Over time, memory and history become difficult to separate. The pensieve offers resistance to that process, a way to preserve fragments of the past before they fade completely. Yet even it cannot eliminate uncertainty, because memories capture experiences, not objective reality. The difference is subtle, but important. A memory reveals what someone saw, what they felt, what they believed, not necessarily what actually happened. This distinction explains why the Department of Mysteries remains fascinated by consciousness. Memory and awareness appear inseparable. One shapes the other continuously. Without memory, consciousness loses continuity. Without consciousness, memory loses meaning. Together, they create identity. Together, they create the experience of being a person. And perhaps that is why the pensieve feels so unsettling, because it exposes the mechanics behind something most people take for granted. The self. The stable identity everyone assumes exists. The uninterrupted story each person tells themselves throughout life. The pensieve reveals that story to be constructed from fragments, moments, experiences, memories linked together over time. Remove enough fragments, and the story changes. Add new fragments, and the story changes again. Identity becomes fluid, adaptable, fragile. This fragility may explain why memories remain so powerful. They are not merely records of who we were, they actively influence who we become. Every decision, every belief, every relationship emerges from accumulated experience. Change the memories and you change the person. The Department of Mysteries understands this, which is why memory research continues alongside investigations into prophecy, consciousness, and death. Because all these subjects converge on the same question: what defines a human being? The soul? The mind? The memories? Or some combination of all three? No answer has achieved consensus. The mystery remains unresolved. And perhaps it always will, because every attempt to define identity eventually encounters another puzzle waiting beyond it. A puzzle hidden not within memories, but within reality itself. For if memories preserve the past, and prophecies reveal the future, then what determines the present? What invisible force connects all moments together? The answer may lie within one of the oldest magical mysteries ever recorded. A mystery involving fate, coincidence, and the strange patterns that seem to guide lives toward outcomes nobody could have predicted. A mystery suggesting that chance itself may not be as random as it appears. The pensieve preserves the past. The Hall of Prophecy offers glimpses of the future. The Time Room studies the strange mechanics that connect one moment to another. Together, these mysteries raise a question that has troubled witches and wizards for centuries. How much of life is choice? And how much is fate? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. People make decisions. Decisions create consequences. Consequences shape the future. The process appears straightforward. Every day presents new choices. Every choice opens new possibilities. Every possibility leads toward a different outcome. Simple, logical, comforting, yet the wizarding world contains countless events that refuse to fit this explanation. Coincidences occur too often. Prophecies emerge unexpectedly. Lives intersect in ways that seem impossible to predict. Again and again, people find themselves moving toward outcomes they never intended. And eventually, a disturbing possibility begins to emerge. What if chance is not entirely random? This question lies at the center of one of the oldest debates in magical history. Some scholars believe reality follows patterns invisible to ordinary perception. Not rigid destiny. Not predetermined futures. Patterns, connections, relationships linking events across time. Most people never notice them. The patterns are too large, too complex, too subtle, yet occasionally they become impossible to ignore. Consider Harry Potter. The circumstances surrounding his life appear extraordinary. A prophecy predicts his importance. Voldemort acts upon that prophecy. The attempt to prevent the prediction helps create it. Years later, countless unlikely events continue pushing both individuals toward the same final confrontation. Viewed separately, each event appears understandable. Viewed together, they begin to resemble something else. A pattern. The same phenomenon appears throughout magical history. Certain individuals repeatedly encounter one another despite enormous odds. Certain objects resurface generation after generation. Certain locations become focal points for major events. The recurrence is difficult to explain. Coincidence remains possible, yet coincidence begins to feel inadequate. The Department of Mysteries has long been fascinated by this problem, because if reality contains hidden structures guiding events, understanding those structures could transform everything. Researchers developed numerous theories. Some focused on prophecy. Others examined time. Still others explored magical probability itself. One particularly influential theory proposed that reality behaves less like a straight line and more like a web. Every decision creates new connections. Every action sends consequences outward. Most consequences remain small. Some become significant. Over time, countless threads intersect. The result is a vast network of possibility. From within the network, events appear random. From outside it, patterns may become visible. The theory remains speculative, yet it explains certain mysteries surprisingly well. Why do prophecies emerge around specific individuals? Why do some lives seem unusually interconnected? Why do seemingly insignificant choices sometimes produce enormous consequences? Perhaps because certain points within the web possess greater influence than others. Moments where countless possibilities converge. Moments where history becomes unusually sensitive. The idea is unsettling. because it suggests people may participate in larger patterns without realizing it, not controlled, influenced, guided by forces operating beyond immediate perception. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when examining magical coincidence. The wizarding world contains many examples. A lost object discovered at exactly the right moment, an unexpected meeting changing the course of history, a forgotten piece of information becoming suddenly relevant years later. Such events often appear miraculous in retrospect, yet they occur too frequently to ignore. Some researchers believe coincidence itself may possess magical properties, not conscious properties, structural properties. The universe may naturally guide certain events toward convergence, like rivers flowing toward the sea. The individuals involved experience choice. The larger pattern experiences completion. This interpretation remains controversial. Critics argue that people simply notice patterns after the fact. Human beings excel at finding meaning. Random events become stories. Coincidences become destiny. Chaos becomes order. Perhaps the apparent patterns exist only in human imagination. Perhaps reality is genuinely random. The debate continues, and neither side has achieved victory. Yet another mystery complicates the discussion: Felix Felicis, the famous potion known as liquid luck. At first glance, the potion appears straightforward. It increases good fortune temporarily. Users experience remarkable success. Opportunities emerge. Obstacles disappear. Events align in their favor. Simple. Except the potion raises profound questions. How does luck function? What exactly changes after consumption? Does the potion alter reality? Does it alter probability? Does it alter perception? Nobody knows. And that uncertainty matters, because Felix Felicis suggests that chance itself may be manipulable. If luck can be influenced through magic, then luck cannot be entirely random. Something exists beneath the surface. Some mechanism remains hidden. The potion interacts with it. Researchers have spent decades attempting to understand how. Most failed. The phenomenon remains stubbornly resistant to explanation. Once again, the Department of Mysteries encountered a force that could be observed but not fully understood. A recurring pattern within magical research. Time can be studied, not fully explained. Love can be observed, not fully explained. Consciousness can be investigated, not fully explained. Luck appears to belong in the same category, a fundamental aspect of reality, operating according to principles beyond current understanding. This realization led some unspeakables toward a fascinating possibility. Perhaps fate and chance are not opposites. Perhaps they are partners. Imagine reality as a landscape of possibilities. Most paths remain uncertain, flexible, open to influence, yet certain destinations exert greater attraction. Certain outcomes become more likely, not guaranteed, merely probable. Choice still matters, but choice operates within a structure larger than itself. The model resembles a river system. Individual drops of water move freely, yet the overall flow still follows recognizable patterns. Perhaps human lives function similarly. Freedom exists, yet larger forces shape probabilities. The theory explains why prophecies can be accurate without eliminating free will. It explains why coincidences can appear meaningful without requiring predestination. Most importantly, it preserves uncertainty, and uncertainty appears essential, because a fully predetermined future would make choice meaningless. A completely random universe would make prophecy impossible. Reality seems to occupy the space between those extremes, a place where possibility and probability interact continuously, a place where choices matter, yet patterns still emerge. The Department of Mysteries has never officially endorsed this interpretation. Perhaps because evidence remains incomplete, perhaps because the truth is more complicated, or perhaps because some mysteries resist final answers. The deeper researchers explore, the more complexity they encounter. Every solution generates new questions. Every discovery reveals larger unknowns. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the final mystery confronting the wizarding world. a mystery older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry, older than recorded magical history itself. The origin of magic. Not spells, not wands, magic itself, the force underlying every prophecy, every enchantment, every mystery we have explored. A force so familiar that few people stop to ask the most obvious question: where did it come from? And why does it exist at all? The Department of Mysteries studies time. It studies death. It studies prophecy, memory, consciousness, and love. Each investigation begins with a question. Each discovery leads to another mystery. Yet behind all of them stands a single puzzle so fundamental that most witches and wizards rarely stop to consider it. Magic itself. Not spells. Not wands. Not enchanted objects. The force beneath all of them. The force that makes the impossible possible. Where did it come from? For thousands of years, magical society has focused on using magic rather than understanding its origin. Students learn spells. Researchers develop enchantments. Healers refine magical treatments. Everyone interacts with magic. Very few ask why it exists at all. This omission is understandable. People often ignore what feels familiar. A fish does not question water. A bird does not question air. Magic surrounds witches and wizards from birth. Its presence feels natural, permanent, self-evident. Yet familiarity does not eliminate mystery. The existence of magic remains one of the least understood phenomena in the entire wizarding world. Consider what magic actually does. It alters reality, not metaphorically, literally. A wand movement can transform one object into another. A spoken incantation can summon invisible forces. Distance becomes irrelevant. Matter changes form. Physical laws bend. Again and again, magic accomplishes things that should be impossible. Most people accept these events because they occur regularly. But frequency does not create explanation. The deeper researchers examine magical phenomena, the more remarkable they become. Why can certain people perform magic, while others cannot? Why does magical ability appear in family lines? Why do Muggle-born witches and wizards emerge unexpectedly? Why do magical creatures possess abilities that differ from human spellcasting? The questions multiply quickly. Answers remain frustratingly scarce. Ancient magical civilizations developed countless theories. Some believed magic originated from nature itself, a force flowing through the world like an invisible current. Trees, mountains, rivers, stars, everything connected through hidden energy. According to this view, witches and wizards simply learned how to interact with forces already present. Others proposed a very different explanation. They argued that magic originates within consciousness, not the world. The mind. Thought itself generates magical potential. Intent shapes reality. Belief influences outcomes. The spell becomes merely the visible expression of deeper mental processes. This theory gained support from several observations. Emotion affects spellcasting. Confidence affects results. Fear disrupts magical control. Again and again, psychological states influence magical performance. The connection appears too strong to dismiss. Yet neither theory fully explains the evidence. Because magic sometimes behaves independently of human thought, ancient artifacts continue functioning long after their creators die. Protective enchantments remain active for centuries. Certain magical locations seem alive with power, regardless of who enters them. These phenomena suggest that magic exists beyond individual minds. Perhaps both theories contain part of the truth. Perhaps magic exists everywhere, and consciousness simply provides access. The Department of Mysteries has explored this possibility extensively. Researchers studying prophecy encountered unexplained forces. Researchers studying love encountered unexplained forces. Researchers studying death encountered unexplained forces. Again and again, different fields appeared connected by invisible relationships. The same patterns emerged repeatedly, as though all magical phenomena originated from a common source, a hidden foundation beneath reality itself. This realization produced one of the most controversial theories in magical history, the unified field theory of magic. According to this idea, Every magical phenomenon represents a different expression of the same underlying force: prophecy, love, time, consciousness, death, memory. Not separate mysteries, different aspects of one larger mystery. The theory remains impossible to prove, yet it offers an intriguing explanation. Perhaps magic is not a collection of unrelated abilities. Perhaps it is a fundamental property of existence, as basic as space, as basic as time, as basic as matter. The implications are enormous, because if magic forms part of reality itself, then studying magic becomes something much larger than learning spells. It becomes an attempt to understand existence, the same goal pursued by the unspeakables, the same goal hidden behind every chamber in the Department of Mysteries. This may explain why definitive answers remain so rare. Researchers are not studying isolated problems. They are studying reality itself, and reality may be more complex than anyone imagines. The further they explore, the larger the mystery becomes. Every explanation reveals deeper uncertainty. Every breakthrough exposes new questions. The process never ends. Perhaps it cannot end, because some mysteries are not obstacles waiting to be solved. They are horizons. The closer you move toward them, the farther they extend. Magic may be such a horizon, a force so vast that complete understanding remains permanently beyond reach. Yet that does not make the search meaningless. Quite the opposite. The search itself may be the point. Generation after generation, witches and wizards continue exploring the unknown. They investigate prophecy. They investigate death. They investigate consciousness. They investigate time. Not because certainty is guaranteed, because curiosity is unavoidable. And perhaps that curiosity represents the most powerful force of all. Stronger than fear, stronger than ignorance, stronger even than magic itself. For in the end, every mystery within the wizarding world leads back to the same realization. The universe remains larger than our understanding of it. The veil still whispers. The prophecies still wait on their shelves. The hallows still inspire debate. And somewhere beneath the ministry of magic, the unspeakables continue their work. Searching, questioning, listening. Not for answers, but for the next mystery waiting to be discovered. For centuries, the Department of Mysteries has pursued answers. It has studied death. It has studied time. It has studied prophecy, memory, consciousness, and love. Every chamber exists because someone believed understanding was possible. Someone believed the unknown could eventually become known. Yet there is another question that rarely appears in ministry records. A question more philosophical than magical. A question that emerges only after examining all the others. What is the purpose of mystery itself? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Mysteries exist because knowledge is incomplete. As understanding grows, mysteries disappear. Simple, reasonable, logical. And yet history suggests something different, because some mysteries have survived every attempt to solve them. Generations of researchers come and go. New theories emerge. New discoveries appear. Yet the central questions remain. Death remains mysterious. Time remains mysterious. Consciousness remains mysterious. The unknown refuses to disappear. Why? Perhaps because mystery is not merely the absence of knowledge. Perhaps mystery serves another purpose. The wizarding world offers countless examples supporting this idea. Consider the veil. For centuries, researchers have observed it, measured it, debated it. Yet certainty remains impossible, and still, the veil continues influencing people. Not through answers, through questions. Every visitor leaves wondering, what lies beyond? Where does the archway lead? What happens after death? The veil's power comes not from explanation, but from curiosity. The same pattern appears elsewhere. The Hall of Prophecy contains thousands of predictions, yet prophecies rarely provide complete understanding. Instead, they create uncertainty, possibilities, interpretations, questions demanding exploration. Again and again, mystery acts less like a barrier and more like an invitation. An invitation to search, an invitation to learn, an invitation to continue. This realization has led some magical philosophers toward an unusual conclusion. Perhaps mysteries are essential, not problems waiting to be eliminated. Forces that drive growth. Think about human history. Every major discovery began with uncertainty. Every breakthrough began with confusion. Every advancement began with a question nobody could answer. Remove mystery entirely and curiosity disappears. Remove curiosity and progress disappears. Without the unknown, exploration loses purpose. The Department of Mysteries may understand this better than anyone. Its researchers spend their lives confronting questions that may never be resolved. And yet they continue. Not because success is guaranteed, because the search itself possesses value. This idea becomes increasingly important when examining magical history. Many of the wizarding world's greatest achievements emerge from unanswered questions. The founders of Hogwarts sought better ways to teach magic. Healers sought better ways to save lives. Researchers sought better ways to understand reality. Each journey began with uncertainty. Each journey depended upon mystery. In this sense, mystery functions almost like fuel. It motivates investigation, encourages creativity, expands understanding. The absence of answers becomes the source of discovery. Paradoxical, yet remarkably consistent. The pattern extends beyond magical research. It appears throughout individual lives as well. People rarely grow during periods of certainty. Growth occurs during uncertainty, during challenges, during moments when outcomes remain unknown. The same principle seems to govern entire civilizations. Questions create movement. Questions create innovation. Questions create transformation. Perhaps that is why certain mysteries endure. Not because they cannot be solved, because solving them completely would remove something important. The mystery of death provides an example. Imagine a world where every detail of death was known, every answer confirmed, every uncertainty removed. Would human life remain the same? Would courage mean the same thing? Would sacrifice carry the same significance? Would hope feel the same? Many philosophers argue it would not. The mystery itself shapes behavior. The uncertainty creates meaning. Similarly, the mystery of the future influences every decision. People choose paths precisely because outcomes remain uncertain. Risk becomes meaningful because results are unknown. Possibility becomes valuable because certainty is absent. The Hall of Prophecy demonstrates this perfectly. Predictions exist, yet complete knowledge remains unavailable. Enough uncertainty survives to preserve choice. Enough mystery survives to preserve freedom. Perhaps this balance is not accidental. Perhaps reality itself depends upon it. The unspeakables rarely discuss such ideas publicly. Their work focuses on observation rather than philosophy. Yet after centuries of research, some conclusions become difficult to avoid. Knowledge is powerful, but knowledge is insufficient. Wisdom requires understanding limits, understanding what can be known, understanding what may remain forever uncertain. This distinction appears repeatedly throughout magical history. The greatest wizards often recognize limits. The most dangerous wizards often reject them. Voldemort sought complete mastery over death. The pursuit destroyed him. Dumbledore eventually accepted uncertainty. That acceptance guided many of his decisions. Again and again, humility proves more sustainable than certainty. The lesson extends beyond individual figures. It extends to magical society itself. The Department of Mysteries continues operating because uncertainty remains. Its existence represents an acknowledgement, a recognition that reality contains depths still unexplored, a recognition that understanding remains incomplete. Most importantly, a recognition that curiosity remains necessary. Perhaps that is the true purpose of the department. Not to eliminate mystery, to preserve humanity's relationship with it. To remind each generation that knowledge has boundaries. To remind each generation that questions matter. Because the moment people believe they understand everything, discovery ends. And discovery has never truly ended. Not in the wizarding world. Not anywhere. Even now, mysteries remain hidden. New questions continue emerging. New possibilities continue appearing. The search continues. The veil still waits. The prophecies still rest upon their shelves. Chambers beneath the ministry. remain active. And somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten corner of Hogwarts or an unexplored section of the magical world, another mystery is waiting. Silent, unnoticed, patient, waiting for someone curious enough to ask the next question. Because every answer eventually leads to another mystery, and perhaps that endless chain of questions is not a flaw in reality. Perhaps it is the very thing that makes reality worth exploring. The Department of Mysteries was never designed to provide comfort. Its purpose was not certainty. Its purpose was not reassurance. Every chamber beneath the ministry confronts a question that remains unanswered. Death, time, love, consciousness, prophecy, memory. The deeper researchers travel into these subjects, the more they encounter the same unsettling reality. Knowledge has limits, yet there is one mystery that connects all the others. A mystery so fundamental that it often goes unnoticed. The mystery of ignorance itself. What does humanity not know? At first, the question sounds simple. The answer appears obvious. Human beings do not know many things. New discoveries occur constantly. Information expands. Understanding evolves. Ignorance shrinks. Or at least that is how progress is usually described. But history tells a more complicated story, because every major discovery reveals additional unknowns. The more knowledge accumulates, the larger the horizon becomes. Imagine standing on a hill, overlooking a distant landscape. At first, the world appears small, limited, understandable. Then you climb higher. The view expands. You see farther. You understand more. Yet the expanded view also reveals new mountains beyond the horizon, new valleys, new territories. Knowledge grows. But so does awareness of ignorance. This pattern appears everywhere within the wizarding world. Researchers studying death discovered the veil. The veil generated more questions than answers. Researchers studying time developed time turners. Time turners exposed paradoxes nobody expected. Researchers studying prophecy preserved predictions. The predictions complicated understanding of free will. Again and again, investigation expands mystery rather than eliminating it. The Department of Mysteries embodies this principle. Its chambers are often misunderstood as repositories of answers. In reality, they are repositories of questions. The unspeakables do not possess complete understanding. They possess better questions. This distinction matters, because meaningful progress rarely begins with certainty. It begins with curiosity, the willingness to admit that something remains unknown, the willingness to confront uncertainty without immediately attempting to eliminate it. Throughout magical history, some of the most dangerous individuals lacked this willingness. They sought absolute answers, absolute control, absolute certainty. Voldemort represents perhaps the clearest example. His obsession with conquering death emerged from an inability to tolerate uncertainty. The unknown frightened him. The possibility of mortality frightened him. Rather than accept mystery, he attempted to destroy it. The consequences became catastrophic. Horcruxes fragmented his soul. Power isolated him. Control consumed him. In the end, his greatest weakness was not lack of knowledge. It was inability to accept limits. Dumbledore followed a different path. He remained curious. He pursued understanding. Yet over time, he also learned caution. He recognized that certain mysteries resist domination. Some questions require humility rather than conquest. This distinction shaped much of his philosophy, and perhaps it explains why he understood the Department of Mysteries better than most. The unspeakables confront this lesson every day. Imagine spending decades studying a phenomenon without reaching certainty. Imagine dedicating your life to questions that may never receive complete answers. Many people would consider such work frustrating, pointless even, yet the department continues. Because uncertainty itself possesses value. Not all value emerges from solutions. Some value emerges from exploration. The journey toward understanding often changes people regardless of whether final answers appear. This idea becomes increasingly important when examining the future of magical research. Every generation inherits unanswered questions. Every generation develops new tools, new theories, new methods. and every generation believes it may finally solve mysteries that resisted previous investigators. Sometimes those hopes succeed. Often they do not, but either outcome contributes to understanding, because failure teaches as much as success, perhaps more. The wizarding world contains countless examples. Failed attempts to conquer death revealed the dangers of Horcruxes. Failed attempts to manipulate time revealed temporal paradoxes. Failed attempts to understand prophecy revealed the complexity of choice. Again and again, limitations became teachers. Mistakes became lessons. Mysteries became guides. The pattern extends beyond magic. It extends into every aspect of existence. People define themselves through questions. Who am I? What matters? What comes next? How should I live? These questions rarely receive permanent answers. Instead, answers evolve. Change. Adapt. The search continues. And perhaps that continuity is important. A life without questions would be static, predictable, complete. Yet completion is not always desirable. Growth requires uncertainty. Learning requires uncertainty. Wonder requires uncertainty. The Department of Mysteries preserves all three. Its existence serves as a reminder that reality remains unfinished, not broken, not incomplete in a negative sense. Open, expanding, filled with possibilities still waiting to be discovered. The veil still whispers. The Hall of Prophecy still waits in silence. The Room of Love still contains forces researchers barely understand. The floating brains continue raising questions about consciousness. The mysteries endure. And perhaps that endurance carries its own message, a message often overlooked by those seeking definitive answers. The universe may not be a puzzle designed to be solved completely. It may be a landscape designed to be explored, a place where understanding grows gradually, a place where every discovery opens new paths, a place where mystery is not the enemy of knowledge, but its companion. The unspeakables seem to understand this. After centuries of investigation, they continue searching, not because they expect certainty tomorrow, because the search itself remains worthwhile. And somewhere beyond the questions we have explored, beyond the chambers hidden beneath the ministry, beyond the limits of current understanding, new mysteries are already waiting. Quietly, patiently, waiting for another generation to begin asking questions, waiting for another curious mind to look into the darkness and wonder what lies beyond. Because the story of mystery never truly ends. It only leads to the next door. Throughout history, witches and wizards have searched for answers. They have searched for ways to overcome death, ways to understand time, ways to predict the future, ways to unlock the secrets hidden within consciousness itself. The Department of Mysteries exists because of that search. Every chamber beneath the ministry represents humanity's refusal to stop asking questions. And yet, after centuries of investigation, one realization continues to emerge. The greatest mysteries are not necessarily hidden in distant places. They are hidden within ordinary existence. This may sound surprising. After all, when people think about magical mysteries, they imagine ancient artifacts, forgotten chambers, lost spells, secret prophecies. Yet the deeper researchers travel into the unknown, the more they discover something unexpected. Reality itself is mysterious, not certain parts of it, all of it. Consider a simple moment. A conversation between friends, a memory from childhood, a decision made in a fraction of a second. Most people experience such moments without questioning them. They feel ordinary, natural, self-explanatory, yet each contains layers of complexity that remain poorly understood. Why does one memory remain vivid while another disappears? Why does one decision alter the course of a life while thousands of others fade into insignificance? Why do certain encounters become meaningful? Why do certain relationships change everything? Questions like these rarely appear inside official ministry reports. Yet they may be just as important as anything studied by the unspeakables, because mystery is not limited to magical phenomena. It exists wherever understanding ends, and understanding ends far sooner than most people realize. The wizarding world often creates the illusion of mastery. A spell solves a problem. A potion repairs damage. An enchantment provides protection. Magic creates a sense of control. the belief that enough knowledge can overcome any obstacle. Yet history repeatedly challenges that belief. Even the most accomplished witches and wizards encounter limits. The founders of Hogwarts encountered limits. Dumbledore encountered limits. Dumbledore encountered limits. The unspeakables encounter limits every day, and those limits reveal something profound. Knowledge is powerful, but it is never complete. The realization can be unsettling. Many people prefer certainty. They prefer clear explanations, definitive answers, fixed conclusions. Mystery disrupts those comforts. Mystery reminds us that reality extends beyond our understanding. That reminder can feel threatening, yet it can also be liberating, because uncertainty creates possibility. If everything were known, discovery would end. If every answer already existed, curiosity would lose purpose. The unknown provides space for imagination, space for exploration, space for growth. This may explain why mystery appears throughout every era of magical history. Ancient wizards search for answers. Modern researchers continue searching. Future generations will undoubtedly do the same. The questions change. The tools change. The methods change. The search continues. And perhaps the search matters more than the destination. The Department of Mysteries quietly reflects this philosophy. Its chambers are not monuments to certainty. They are monuments to curiosity. The Hall of Prophecy does not eliminate uncertainty about the future. The Death Chamber does not eliminate uncertainty about mortality. The Brain Room does not eliminate uncertainty about consciousness. Each chamber exists because questions remain. The unanswered questions are the reason the work continues. Many people assume that progress means replacing mystery with knowledge. In reality, progress often means replacing old mysteries with new ones. Researchers solve one problem and uncover three more. A discovery closes one door and opens another. The horizon moves. The unknown expands. The process never truly ends. This endless expansion of mystery may be one of reality's most remarkable features. The universe seems larger every time humanity learns something new about it. The wizarding world is no exception. Every breakthrough reveals deeper complexity. Every explanation uncovers hidden layers. Every answer generates fresh questions, and perhaps that is exactly how it should be. Because a completely understood universe would be a static universe, a finished universe, a place without wonder. Wonder depends upon uncertainty. It depends upon the possibility that something unexpected remains waiting beyond the next discovery. The possibility that reality still contains surprises. The possibility that today's impossibility may become tomorrow's breakthrough. History provides countless examples. Ideas once considered absurd eventually became accepted knowledge. Phenomena once dismissed as impossible became ordinary facts. The boundary between mystery and understanding constantly shifts. Yet it never disappears completely. Something always remains beyond reach. Something always waits beyond the horizon. The unspeakables understand this better than most. Perhaps that is why they continue their work despite the absence of final answers. They understand that mystery is not failure. Mystery is evidence that exploration remains possible. Evidence that curiosity remains necessary. Evidence that reality still has more to teach. And maybe that is the most important lesson hidden beneath the mystery. Not that answers exist for every question, but that questions themselves possess value. The willingness to wonder, the willingness to investigate, the willingness to admit uncertainty. These qualities have driven every major discovery in magical history. Without them, progress stops. Without them, understanding stagnates. Without them, the future becomes smaller. The Department of Mysteries exists to prevent that future, to preserve curiosity, to preserve wonder, to preserve the search. Because somewhere beyond every answer lies another question, and somewhere beyond every mystery lies another mystery waiting to be discovered. The search continues. The questions remain. And the next mystery is already waiting. For generations, the Department of Mysteries has stood at the center of the wizarding world's greatest questions. Its chambers contain prophecies. Its archives contain centuries of research. Its halls preserve investigations into death, time, consciousness, and forces that remain poorly understood even today. To many witches and wizards, the department represents knowledge. To others, it represents secrecy. But perhaps both interpretations miss something important, because the Department of Mysteries may actually represent a far older human instinct, the desire to look beyond the edge of what is known. Every civilization develops that instinct. Ancient explorers crossed oceans without knowing what waited beyond the horizon. Early astronomers studied distant stars without understanding their nature. Researchers throughout history pursued answers despite possessing little certainty that answers even existed. The wizarding world follows the same pattern. Its greatest achievements rarely emerge from confidence. They emerge from curiosity. Someone noticed something unusual. Someone asked a question. Someone refused to stop searching. Again and again, progress began with uncertainty. The Department of Mysteries exists because uncertainty never disappeared. In fact, uncertainty appears to grow stronger the deeper researchers investigate reality. This observation has puzzled many scholars. One might expect mysteries to become smaller as knowledge expands. Yet the opposite often occurs. Researchers solve one puzzle only to discover another hidden beneath it. A question leads to an answer. The answer reveals a larger question. The process repeats endlessly. Consider the veil. Initial investigations focused on its purpose. What is it? Where does it lead? What exists beyond it? Centuries later, researchers still lack definitive answers. Yet the mystery has expanded. Questions about consciousness became connected to questions about death. Questions about death became connected to questions about the soul. Questions about the soul became connected to questions about identity. A single mystery evolved into an entire network of unknowns. The same pattern appears throughout the department. Prophecy leads to questions about free will. Free will leads to questions about time. Time leads to questions about causality. Causality leads to questions about reality itself. The deeper one travels, the more interconnected everything becomes. Perhaps that interconnectedness is the most important discovery of all. The unspeakables may study separate subjects. Yet those subjects rarely remain separate for long. Love influences sacrifice. Sacrifice influences destiny. Destiny influences prophecy. Prophecy influences choice. Choice influences identity. Identity influences memory. Every mystery eventually touches another. The boundaries begin to dissolve. And as those boundaries disappear, a fascinating possibility emerges. Perhaps reality is not divided into separate mysteries at all. Perhaps reality is one mystery viewed from different angles. The idea sounds abstract, yet it explains something remarkable about magical history. Many of the wizarding world's greatest discoveries occurred when researchers crossed traditional boundaries. When they connected subjects previously treated as unrelated, patterns emerged. Relationships appeared. New understanding became possible. The Department of Mysteries seems uniquely designed for this kind of thinking. Its researchers spend their lives exploring unknown territory, not because they expect certainty, because uncertainty creates opportunity. The unknown contains possibilities. The known contains conclusions. Both have value, yet only one continues expanding. This distinction becomes especially important when considering the future. What mysteries remain undiscovered? What questions have not yet been asked? History suggests there are many. Perhaps entire branches of magical knowledge remain hidden. Perhaps forces exist that humanity has never observed. Perhaps reality contains structures so unfamiliar that current language cannot even describe them. The possibility is difficult to dismiss. After all, every generation tends to assume it understands the world more completely than previous generations. Every generation eventually discovers otherwise. The founders of Hogwarts could not predict modern magical society. Modern researchers cannot predict what future centuries may uncover. Knowledge expands. Perspective changes. Mysteries evolve. The process continues. And perhaps it will continue indefinitely. Some philosophers argue that this endless expansion reveals something fundamental about existence. Reality may not be a problem waiting to be solved. Reality may be an exploration without a final destination. a journey rather than a conclusion. If that interpretation is correct, then the Department of Mysteries serves a purpose far greater than research. It serves as a reminder that uncertainty is not weakness, a reminder that unanswered questions are not failures, a reminder that curiosity remains one of humanity's most powerful qualities. Without curiosity, there would be no exploration. Without exploration, there would be no discovery. Without discovery, there would be no growth. The unspeakables preserve that tradition, not by providing answers, by continuing the search. Every experiment, every observation, every question contributes to a larger effort stretching across generations. An effort not to eliminate mystery, but to understand it a little better. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps complete understanding was never the goal. Perhaps the goal was always the journey itself. The willingness to keep asking. The willingness to keep learning. The willingness to step into darkness without certainty about what waits ahead. Because every mystery we have explored ultimately leads to the same conclusion. The wizarding world remains filled with unknowns. The veil still stands. The prophecies still wait in silence. The questions surrounding consciousness remain unresolved. The origins of magic remain uncertain. The future remains unwritten. And somewhere beyond the limits of current understanding, beyond the archives of the ministry, and beyond the imagination of even the most brilliant unspeakables, new mysteries are already taking shape, invisible for now, unnoticed for now, but waiting for another curious mind, another question, another generation willing to search beyond the edge of certainty, because mystery is not the opposite of knowledge. Mystery is the reason knowledge continues to grow, and as long as questions remain, the story is not over. It is only beginning again.